work that's going on in Marxist philosophy today, if any. I can kind of problematize this for you in terms of the incorporation. Derrida's lectures on Marx, by the way, have just been published in France, and I think they're going to be translated 1976. He gave a series of lectures on Marx, and most of you know that the specters of Marx came out in the around in the late 90s. This book on Marx, but these are lectures he gave post May '68. 8 years later, and before. They kind of made deconstruction into the double take, much more of an institutional practice, whereas before that they were much more oriented, but both towards street and institution in Paris, in my opinion. Yeah, so the deconstruction, one of the things that defeated it, I think it made it, diluted it, was that it became massively institutionalized. Yes, it hadn't been. Yeah.
I was just going to go to the Negri and.
Yeah, sure, please, yeah.
Did you have something?
I was going to ask about that Nietzsche just for a second before, because I'm trying to write about friendships, and Nietzsche has in Zarathustra this paradoxical conversation about friendships, which I think was pretty interesting, but I didn't totally understand the terms. So I was just wondering if you'd unpack that at any point in your reading.
Can I send you an email? Can I send you an email on that and make a concrete kind of intervention?
Yeah, no. I just because I read
it's from Zarathustra.
Yeah.
And you have to take Zarathustra with a grain of salt, because at times there's many parodic. Yeah, there's many parodic and highly nuanced passages in there, and if you just take it so much out of context, you're missing what he may be intending to do. Yeah. So there's a lot of misunderstandings about Nietzsche vis-a-vis the Jews, vis-a-vis women, vis-a-vis,
That's the part I threw out a little bit with that paragraph. It seemed a little bit.
Yeah.
So, okay, cool.
Yeah. By the way, his, object of desire ended up as a Freudian analyst, and Freud was in love with Lou Andrea Salome, as Nietzsche was too. So this was the, she was, quite the quite the figure.
Yeah.
Rilke's wife and what's his name? Paul Ray's wife, both.
What was his name?
Paul Ray, R-E-E, and her name is, I'll put it on the board. Yeah.
Her name was Paul Ray.
No. Her name was Lou Andrea Salome. Yeah.
Lou Andreas.
Yeah.
Salome. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. She was a major figure. She was married to Paul Ray, who was an English psychologist, of which stimulated the reading of and writing of the genealogy of morals.
Okay.
He wrote a book on the history of English morals, and he went against the Englishmen. And then she had a long affair with Rilke, the poet, right? And then she became a confidant, major confidant of Freud. And her lover, Freud destroyed, a man named Victor Tosk, who wrote on wartime neurosis and was a very advanced thinker on schizophrenia during this time. So you have all these kind of interplays.
And Victor Tosk, Freud didn't have a positive influence on.
No, did not, And basically, Tosk ended up committing suicide. Yeah,
wow.
There's a lot of dirt in the, both movements, psychoanalytic and communist.
You could say that.
Especially in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
A lot of dirty stuff.
Okay.
So anyway, but Tosk is interesting, actually rehabilitated by Deleuze and Guattari and Anti-Oedipus.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of a moment there. But she was a major figure, and she was a major psychoanalyst, in her own right, and very much stayed with Freud. She became one of the first, truly, outspoken women in the psychoanalytic movement.
Wow.
Yeah. Which was interesting. The psychoanalytic movement had much more woman's presence than the communist movement.
Freud's daughter.
Yeah, well, she became,
Yeah.
And then then you saw the women go at each other, Melanie Klein, against each other. So anyway, to go to that, but I'll take a look at the passage and send you something on that.
Appreciate it. Thank
you. So you want to go to Negri now, please?
Well, I just want to know if I'm the only one. I found your article in the Situations Archive in 2005, and I found that to be incredibly helpful and very clarifying.
Okay.
And
Well, thank you.
I mean, am I some
I'm
kind of
usually not that
stupid,
way.
or is this stuff really hard to read? I want to know why he has to invent a whole new vocabulary for everything. And like Doug Henwood wrote a piece in Jacobin about MMT, which is neither here nor there, but in the course of it he said something snarky about Negri, like in one of his rare lucid moments, Negri said yada yada. And I thought, well, that's kind of snarky, but god damn it, it's hard to read that man.
Well, Doug Henwood, that's all he has to say.
I know. I know.
He doesn't have a nice thing to say
Thank you
about it.
very much.
He's a mean guy.
I'm not
He hasn't
Lightweight.
never lifted a
And
pinky.
he's a lightweight.
Yeah, never lifted a pinky either.
I don't,
Sorry.
I don't argue
Big
with
like
that.
Yeah.
But I'm also not going to pretend that I don't have trouble understanding
Yeah, of course.
transvaluation and constituent power and exactly what I mean,
Okay.
I could just like read this, some of the paragraphs I read 6 times in.
Okay. Fair enough, yeah. I mean,
Why does he, what's the?
Well, I think
remember
part of the
at some
point is
you
that-
said Adorno wrote in a very, Adorno's writing was very intense and hard to decipher because he didn't want it to be co-opted.
right. There was
Is
a
that what's going on here?
deliberative strategy on Adorno's part to write the way he did so the thought itself could not be co-opted. And he didn't want to make it simple. And part of the reading strategy was always to be engaged in a kind of negation of the negation and the negative dialectic through and throughout, that hopefully would transform the reader into something different. Negri, I don't know if he has the same intention, but I think what happened with Negri, I put up here to answer to your first question, what happened, is a baptism in the River Seine. When he's in Paris, he reads Foucault, he reads Deleuze, he becomes friends with Guattari. All of these people do not write for the plain reader. They're not clear and distinct or especially lucid writers. In some ways, I mean, I'm not sure about the intention, you know, I mean, of all those people, I had one conversation with Guattari before he died in New York, and never really had, any reason to talk about the way they really wanted to create neologism. You know, they want to create new logics and new terms, new terminology, because they felt that the old vocabulary of workers' movements, working class, proletariat, all of these things no longer were sufficient to talk about the increasing changes in neoliberal capitalism, for lack of a better term. So this is what I think he's trying to do, and also kind of universalize it through categories that come from Marx, but to read Marx in terms of how you revalue Marx for the contemporary period. So the transvaluation, which is a term, by the way, that comes from Nietzsche, on a transvaluation of all values.
I thought it came from Simone.
Well, I mean, Nietzsche's the one who actually uses transvaluation in a radical sense, in the real radical sense.
Simondon.
Simondon, yeah. Well, let me put his name.
That was trans individual.
Yeah.
Yeah. Transindividuation is a term that's used by Gilbert Simondon, right, who was a student of Deleuze, and was one way that philosophy went, that this was very important to see the outside mechanisms determining the processes of individuation, right? This is what he's really looking at, how the objects or the techniques in the world transform people rather than the other way around. And he's very important, Gilbert Simondon, for both Bernard Stiegler, right, and for a man named Jason Reed. So this becomes a new kind of vocabulary that never really took hold in the United States until, a few academics have been looking at this because of the work of we did some work on Stiegler, right? On Bernard Stiegler. And Stiegler takes a point of departure from Simondon in terms of transindividuation and what he calls disindividuation. that what happens is that the consumer society basically individuates people, does not individuate it. Be all that you can be, all this kind of nonsense, a credit card, what's in your wallet, are all processes of de-individuation, the consumer society. That's what it does. So they're looking for terms. I mean, if I can be, again, this crucial word that we went through earlier in the semester, estrangement and alienation, or the Entfremdung, is bringing rethought, right, through new categories. One, this is one category that rethinks it, right, etc. Individuation in Stiegler, right? That this process is going on in this contemporary period, right, etc. And you have many other kind of variations here. So Negri, in a way, is trying to look at living labor as being between, these kind of things, and trying to build a new vocabulary. So one crucial thing he does, maybe just to go to the text to see this at work, he does speak about the eternal and innovation, right? Do you remember that? The difference between both love, because he's really looking at this from the temporal point of view, right? This is from time. So what do we mean by transvaluation on page 235? Transvaluation is the point where the eternal and innovation meet. It is the trigger that innovates the eternal. Transvaluation emerges at precisely the point where the tradition of the classical and modern materialism breaks down. So the breakdown is we no longer talk about alienation and the proletariat to this kind of French-Italian thinking of this period. We need to talk about it in different terms, in terms of different time, temporality. This is where he's really trying to go here. So they're co-substantial in the creation of new beings. So again, the new subject, the new agency, and remember, this is written right after Seattle, after the WTO. I mean, Ben knows Beth too, right? The struggles that were going on before 9/11, that this is written during that period where new agencies being looked for, and he's trying to provide, if you will, as a theorist, a vocabulary to work through. So you no longer talk about the people, you talk about the multitude. You no longer talk about alienation as such, or you're an alienated human being, but you're basically, in the moment between the eternal, temporal, out of time, but at the same time in that out of time, or at the edge of time, you begin to go through new processes of innovation. So this is what he's really looking at. The more complicated multitude is basically about, the new worker, for everybody from the data programmer, software engineers, etc. He's looking at these kind of new forms of labor that are coming out, and how do you basically account for this vis-a-vis living labor, and how do you provide agency for these, where's the agency going to be in this new group of people? This is what he's trying to do, to try to universalize it. So, anyway, it's recognized the fact that it has no model. So there's no previous model either. So you're in this spontaneous moment of creation, right, of innovation, and on the edge of time, right, together. This is always going on. I know it sounds very abstract, but he's trying to say, look, contingency itself lives in that position. Precarity lives in that kind of position. Precarity lives at the edge of time. You don't know, the same thing. In that precarity, in that contingency, there could be a spontaneity. I mean, Negri would like something like the teachers' strike in West Virginia, where the base rises up spontaneously and nothing's really, quote unquote, planned out, right, on the old models. So what you're really doing here is you're trying to look at, political practice without previous models. You used to sit around, according to Lenin, according to Trotsky, according to Bukharin, according to, so-and-so, Ho Chi Minh, Mal,
The scriptures.
Che Guevara. What? I'm sorry?
The scriptures.
The scriptures themselves, right? According to this, in the plan of the scriptures, this is what we think would work in this context, or this is where the analysis is. Negri's trying to throw that out, both the baby and the bathwater, and saying we need to go to a new model in terms of dealing with living labor. So this is the reason for the new language in many ways. So anyway, he says, transvaluation sits itself in a radical manner at the edge of time and only there. So it's only this transvaluation could really take place unless you're at, that moment of complete precarity and really at the edge, right? It's always at the edge of time that this is happening. So this is very much, an attempt, if you will, to throw out, the proletariat as a term, right? To throw out working class, to throw out the category of alienation, and to think of a kind of new vocabulary to deal with where we are, right? So, transvaluation does not see the world as adolescent, it is adolescent. So that's another thing he's talking about too. I'm not saying that this is his best, he's always been good on labor, but, I'm not so sure this is most, serious work. I mean, but I mean, he's really trying to work with things going forward under the general heading of what Marx calls in the Grundrisse of the general intellect, right? And again, you have to remember that Negri and other Italians are writing against, and Negri in particular, against Heideggerian theories of time as futural ecstasies. So they're trying to think of this in terms of a Marxian time that's working again on the edge of time. Right? The edge of time. And this time is also not only the edge of labor time, but he's building, it's not only labor time of the everyday, but it's also, he's trying to form an ontology, a new being, right? In a way. This is the theoretical endeavor, if this makes sense in some ways, what his ambition and his task is. To kind of build, in this, create the new being. Right? We're going to talk about that. And hence, the new revolutionary subject. Right? And hence, the new revolutionary agent. So no longer, I know we've been through this and Ben's here, is protest and resistance never enough for Negri? This is not what the agency is about, right? The agency is about a completely different understanding of what a transformative politics would be. It's an ontology of the new kinds of forms, in some ways. That's where he's really going. It's not going to work if you just go, I heard a lot of the Sanders today, well, we're going to a plan about how to motivate ourselves around the marshals, when we go out to demonstrate and walk. To people like Negri, this is worthless at this point, in a way, worthless. It's also, it also is a cry, with the yellow vest movement, in a sense, to be much more careful than just to get excited about it, right, in a sense, because it's going to have a tendency to go to the right. It's much more complicated than we're beginning to see. Yes, of course we support, people that are going to fight, for a better wage or against attacks, and they'll take to the streets and will work in this sense. But there's also all the ambiguities and the levels of the movement itself are kind of displaced, right? How can you say that? It's no good. And I hear Badiou is coming out in Le Monde tomorrow, somewhat against the Yellow Vest movement. I'll see what he has to say, but I got a call this morning from Paris that, I'm sure he's not going to just say, I'm against it fully. He's going to give you reasons. I mean, in a sense. So anyway, it's another thing. Some people on the right are calling it fascist movement. Some people on the left are calling it, it has tendencies towards fascism. So you have to, again, we're dealing with a very, very different kind of age, if I may say, than when we would talk about in Lukács's time, in the early Marxist time, all this humanist, to go back to that part of this course, the humanist rhetoric of the alienated worker, the alienated subject, the alienated spirit, that this language is no longer adequate, according to, the Negres and certainly the Althusers, you know. So this is coming out of a tradition that is not really so much part of North American Marxism. You know, this is another thing that, you know, Althusser was relegated to the academy in some ways. You know, he was dismissed, you know, by a lot of people on the left, right? But in Paris and in the theoretical circles out of which Negri comes, Althusser, Deleuze, Foucault are all prominent in this thinking. And they really wanted to create a whole new language, a new code. When Althusser says Marx discovers a new continent, and that continent is that of history, he's talking about creating a whole new language of appropriating things. I'm not saying that, you know, look, we know what this means historically and etymologically and all of this, but again, to think beyond it in terms of new terms, right? So if you have a shift, and think about the last, you know, look, alienation is a crucial word during the 1960s and maybe even into the 70s, right? In terms of I feel alienated. Susan Sontag made a career out of the alienated hero. She used to write a lot of essays, you know, against interpretation. It was popularized. Many books.
Marcuse, a lot of books.
Marcuse too. Yeah, Fritz Pappenheim, the book on the alienation of modern man. Bertolt Oman, of course, you know, early book on alienation. All of these things were very, very prominent during that time. However, since that moment, and you know, I'm beginning to think this through in many different, I'm trying to think this through in many different dimensions now, but since that moment, at least in terms of the switch to finance capital as being dominant, it always was dominant since the 1920s, in my opinion, but this new technocratic capitalism, you know, instead of just calling it neoliberalism, you have to remember the wealth. Microsoft is not a corporate entity in 1960s. Intel is not a corporate entity in 1960s. Apple and Amazon don't come on the scene until the 70s, you know, and I mean Amazon even later. Now the world's largest corporation is a baby in terms of corporate history, in terms of the GE, et cetera. And the funds and the monies that has been made on this is astronomical. And these are banks at this point, and power kegs. So the experience of working as a software engineer, right, or someone that works at the Google complex is going to be very different than factory labor. And I think they're beginning to, I mean, that people like Negri and others, right, are seeing this, you know? So you have people like, I mean, I guess, what's her name, Ursula Hughes, do you know her work? Labor in the digital economy. It's a good book, you know, she's solid on this, you know? So they're beginning to look at different levels and new types of experience that the so-called worker is going through, what living labor, what's happening to it. So I think Negri sees this and he wants to redefine what is living labor versus that, because that's the general category here. You bring up two categories. Transvaluation is part of the method, right, where it happens, right? And constitutive power is kind of like against constituted power. The constitutive, and this goes back to Machiavelli. I think I mentioned this, you know, that the dual perspectivism of Machiavelli is at stake here, where Machiavelli in the early part of The Prince, when he writes the letter to Lorenzo de' Medici, talks about the prince must be able to see from the valley up to the mountain, and then from the mountain back down into the valley. So you must be both of the people, right? And, you know, quote, for the people, or rule over the people. So this dual perspectivism continues to play out in Negri through these terms. This is a dialectic in history for Negri. Constituent power, which is dominant power, and people power, or revolutionary power versus that of constituted power.
It's just kind of an unfortunate word in English because we talk about constituents of like an elected official.
Right. No. This is the verb to constitute something, to make it in consciousness. Yeah, this is the verb. This is how he's using the verb. Yeah, he's using the verb. Right? as and also what elements make up that consciousness. So it both has a praxis to it as well as a historical location, a historical situatedness. It's a very, very interesting term in that sense. So you're constituting in consciousness, right, this power, right, in a way. You're also seeing how the power itself was constituted. And at the same time, you're basically understanding phenomenologically what elements made up that constitution. This is language out of Husserl, out of phenomenology. Yeah, the verb. You constitute something, right? Both making in the consciousness, right? Not especially only making it in the world, but making in consciousness, and also what elements are going into this constitutive power or constitutional power. Now, does that help a little bit? I mean, so in a way, in some ways, when Bernie Sanders speaks about the 1%, or these kind of things, Wall Street, these kind of signifiers, if you will, to be a little more abstract, but it's true. This constituted power is what needs to be overthrown, right? But it needs to be understood as well. So he's always looking at this, and then looking at how this constituent, not as voters, not as being in a district, but really being of the people, right? As a movement. This is a movement power, right?
So how's it to be overthrown if it's both the dominant and the people? I mean, the people are like...
Well, the
he's
dual
saying
perspective
it's
is
different.
He's saying it's different,
Yeah.
but they're connected in a dialectic.
yes, but I mean you have to. I mean, but we're always connected in a dialectic.
Yeah.
You don't overthrow. I mean, you have to have power to overthrow power, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that's kind of the thing here, right?
Yeah.
You need power to have power. So his attempt, and again, I mean, I'm kind of speaking Negri here, to go back to this transvaluation that he brings up is a new kind of term that is going to situate itself between, innovation, and the edge of time. So this is really a strategy towards precarity, not towards the, quote, unions, right, with pension programs, or towards that. It's really about the precarity as being the new revolutionary agents in the world. This is what he's really trying to get to here. This is their new moment. And that precarity also becomes part of Multitude later on in the second volume of their 4-volume series, which got a lot of flack. Empire, Multitude, Commonwealth, and I think the last one's Assembly. Yeah. And they get progressively worse. I'm serious.
How is
Empire
precarity
damn near killed
a
me.
new revolutionary power? I'm just trying to...
Well, it's a subject. It's not a revolutionary path. It's a subject. It's a new subject that is basically now no longer, that the world itself is the precarity. So this has a long history. So Ernst Jünger in the 1920s writes a piece called The Worker, and he comes up with the phrase total mobilization, and that the worker can be shifted from place to place. The camps come out of this. The gulags come out of this. The U.S. factory system, the British factory system, all about this total mobilization. And then really what happens later is that they begin to think of mobile labor. This is actually reflecting conditions in the world, deindustrialization. This is all happening under deindustrialization and deterritorialization. Nobody has territorial representation anymore. Everybody's deterritorialized. So Deleuze and Guattari, for example, are going to study this from the standpoint of schizophrenia and capitalism. And what happens in schizophrenia is that the flows become deterritorialized. There's no symbolic order that the schizophrenic cannot put together, this moment, right? First, the psychosis that sets in, that is the loss of the symbolic order, and then secondly, the flows just expand and expand and expand, and don't have any kind of territorialization. So they use this term both in a psychoanalytic sense, right, And also in terms of what happens to, people in terms of deindustrialization, layoffs, and all of this, to point more and more to precarity. Capitalism goes
Yeah.
through a major crisis in the 1970s. The second slump, according to Mandel, etc. This, to me, is when everything starts changing. Give everybody credit. Fuck them on wages. Excuse my language. I mean, I guess we're okay. Anyway,
And we're,
yeah.
and we're
Yeah.
into another crisis now, is that I think, I think that,
sorry.
neoliberal capitalism is in crisis.
It's a legitimacy crisis, I think, is the.
Well, it's a legitimation crisis, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, whether they're able to figure their way out of it, I'm not sure.
Well,
But I mean, I think that Trump is sort of a symptom of that crisis.
yeah, I mean, I certainly agree that it's a symptom. Mhm.
But you don't really think it's a crisis.
It depends on what you mean. Listen, Marx, as early as 1848, excuse me, is talking about, that what capitalism is expert at is creating crisis. That's what capitalism does. That's how it thrives. Look at the stock market. Again, I study this and, dabble, so to speak. Look at the stock market. In December, everybody's ready for the next crash. Right? Remember?
Yeah.
You had this nosedive on the market.
Yeah.
It continued. Every bit that was wiped off is back to the levels.
Yeah.
So, somebody sure is slick, as they used to say, right? right? So anyway, it thrives off of capital. And then you think of the slogans, when there's blood on the street, buy, J.P. Morgan. Think about these things. The more things go down, you don't. So the question to me is yes, doesn't capitalism need crises to continue? You have to redefine what do we really mean by crisis. Again, this would be part of that dialectic for constituted power. Crisis means something different than it does to constitutive power. The people that are affected by the crisis, right? That plants are closed, everyday life crises where it affects people's lives, which is the bulk of it, but also how constituted power will either create crises, right, or then try to deal with them. So what does constituted power do? And Bernie Sanders says this is no news to anybody. He just had the figure wrong. What do? They bail out Wall Street. You know the slogan.
Yeah.
You privatize the profits and you socialize the losses. That was the slogan of 2008. You pass on all the things to the taxpayer, to the lower middle class and the poor people who paid for the bailout, right? To a degree, right?
It was more than $1 trillion.
It was 16 trillion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you think about this. So look, if you look at this and you look at it as a dynamic, crisis has different meanings, right? To both the systemic crisis. Is there a systemic crisis in capital? This is a question, right? I think it's a very good question in a sense, because we read the New York, if you go by the New York Times, you're gonna end up broke. They're calling for the next recession, in December. Here we are, March 2nd, right? And, another good week on Wall Street, so to speak, right? Because Trump, was able to, fend off the Chinese for another, 6 months or something like that. There are all kinds of reasons. There's a lot of money out there. That's the real reason, and it just keeps moving between certain markets, There are only 4 places you can put money. Real estate, and that's very high, right? Unless you're a builder, et cetera. Right now, not a great investment, you can see, in a lot of ways. If you're paying top of the market in Fort Greene right now, who knows in 5-10 years? Is that going to really still be there? In some ways. Commodities, right? Everything from precious metals to, cotton, oil, et cetera, all these commodity bases. The stocks, equities, right? And there are many derivatives around that. And then, of course, bonds, which have been the safe products. So you have these are the four basic instruments where money can go. So right now, most people think still that the stock market, the U.S. stock market, because of the stability of the police-surveillance state, is good enough. This is still the best place to put money internationally.
Yeah, there was a thing last night on the rise of surveillance capitalism.
Did you go to roulette?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
But I heard her speak.
At the BAI, she was on Amy Goodman's program on her Friday morning.
Right. She spoke at the Murphy Institute.
Oh, she did?
months ago.
Okay, yeah. She's smart,
Yeah.
She's interesting. She does what, in my opinion, I've been, again, give her credit, she does what he doesn't do, the empirical work.
Right.
She went into Google, she went into Apple. Yeah, it's a book worth looking at, Surveillance Capitalism.
Yeah.
What's her name?
Her name is Zuboff.
Zuboff, right?
Shoshana Zuboff.
Yeah, nice Catholic girl. Huh?
But it seems to me one of the interesting things about the market now is that there's a lot of selling, and there's, to the extent that there's buying, it's corporate buyback of their own stocks. And part of that is driven by the fact that dividends are going to get taxed, whereas increases in shareholder gains are going to be taxed when they're sold as capital gains.
You make a very good point from the policy
So it's all
perspective.
based on gaming
Yes.
the tax system because,
Part of it.
yeah,
Part of it.
there are other reasons
Yeah,
for
yeah.
buyback of your own
Right,
stock. I
right.
mean, they're multiple, and a lot of
Right.
it has to do with the metrics of how,
Right.
how
keep
you
the
get
value
evaluated when you
inflated.
run these
Right.
things.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting, that's an interesting ratio that's changing right now.
Well, you're getting more and more of that because, companies are realizing they can increase quote-unquote shareholder value by doing that.
Yeah.
And that they can enter into traders as the market, whereas before that was a very, very infrequent way of dealing with things.
Actually illegal, I think, at one point.
Yeah, I think
Maybe it was illegal, but I mean, I
before
remember.
1982, I think
Yeah,
was
before
it?
Yeah.
Reagan kind of brought that back in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I mean, the notion of crisis needs to really be examined when we use that word because, for some people, we're in the crisis of the system's collapsing. Well, it's not collapsing, unfortunately, I mean, I wish it would of its own accord or of all the mismanagements and the mistakes, but the system is, still, embedded in many, many principles that keep, this going. Right?
The Invisible Committee points out also that this is like, for the Marxists, this is the fetish. This is the big one's coming. And
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
a good.
the drumbeat. God, maybe this is going to be the big one. And
Yeah.
it's very
You sound like
fetishized.
Trump. Maybe this is going to be the big one.
I mean,
I'm just kidding. I like
the Invisible
that. I like the way you
Committees-
do your hands like him too.
I was doing my hands like that way before that. That's too bad. That's the point of reference.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
No, it's
I
okay.
like the way you use the language. Yeah, the big one, right? Yeah.
Well, that's-
The Invisible Committee is absolutely right, in my opinion,
Yeah.
about this. If you bank on this system falling from its own internal contradictions, give me a break.
Yeah.
And you know how many generations have thought this? I mean, really.
Since 1848.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
constant.
A constant part of the discussion.
Yeah.
No way. With all due respect, again, to our friends at Economy Update and, other people out there, that see this. I mean, David Harvey doesn't believe that. I mean, he understands at least that they'll go through structural adjustment programs on the international level.
Right.
He understands
Right.
that. Yeah, many ways, right? So, anyway, so going back to Negri for a second, I think, again, to go back to your very good question at the beginning about those two terms, et cetera, this is something you have to really take into account in his work. That Negri, before he went to Paris, was much more of a, quote, concrete, very much part of the workers' movement, right, in Italy.
Yeah.
We worked with factory workers. You could actually do a great thing if you do the early Antonioni trilogy, especially Red Desert, and what Negri and Tronti and others are doing in the factories. It'd be a great study right there of early Italy, post-World War II. Italy, the early 60s, and
Which movie?
what's going on. A
Red
Red
Desert.
Desert of
Okay.
Michelangelo Antonioni. And anyway, but he changes radically, after he goes to Paris, when he becomes, first of all, the Althusser seminar, the lessons on the Grundrisse were a way of shaking up a kind of traditional reading of Grundrisse as being notebooks before Capital. Negri came out and said Grundrisse is the central text that we really need to study because of the chapters on money. And this is much more important and has been neglected. And instead, we shouldn't look at this as a foundational text for Capital, but maybe a foundational text for our purposes in terms of movement. And he gets the notion of the general intellect. And again, I think something very crucial for our time to reread and reinterpret are pages 690 through 720 of the Grundrisse, which is on the machine. Very, very important. Yeah. Very important. 690 to 720.
Yeah.
And especially with the thinking machines, that are going on. Yeah. So anyway, to go back, so anyway, he changes his language. He's exposed to, quote unquote, what was then known as high French theory, right? He never went the way of the psychoanalytic or that way, but certainly Deleuze, right? He certainly thought through a lot of the stuff of the anti-Oedipus, and we're going to read next semester. I think we read parts of it before. Maurizio Lazzarato was present at Deleuze's lectures in the 70s, early on, who's a kind of combination of Negri and Deleuze, The Making of Indebted Man. Very, very great book, I think, and we're going to read that in the Age of Anxiety. And also, he's exposed to the Althusserian notion of against the subject and against subjectivity, right, in a sense, right? And he's going to start using language like this. It's not subjectivity, Beth, but substituted for subjectivity is living labor.
Oh.
Yeah. So he's beginning to look at living labor as really the moment here. This is really the moment to be thinking through, right?
So living labor is equivalent to subjectivity.
Yes.
He also calls it love.
And love. Right. Yes. Yeah, it's interesting the way he uses love here too, right? Not only erotic and spiritual love, but yeah. And then he goes into what a political decision is. But yeah, go ahead. What were you going to say? You going to say
I was
something?
looking
Yeah.
for the part where he talks about, I think it's 9.1, he says, the liberation of living labor thus becomes dystopia.
Um, 9.1 is the liberation of living labor, freeing itself from dead labor, right? Has represented the utopia of every moment of the poor movement. Right? Living labor means, purely and simple, the power to create being, whereas there's only the void, edge of time again, and innovation. Living labor escapes utopia when, through the development of the teleology of the common, it also definitively escapes from the transcendental dominion of dead labor when it reappropriates the tool and as a result is able to expose itself freely to the immeasurable on the edge of being. The liberation of living labor, yes, thus becomes a dystopia. Right? Right? Yeah.
Excuse me, that's not the 9.1 under Multitudo politics, is it?
Which
Living labor, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, this is, there's a 9.1 but it's
9.1 is productive constellation.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, 9.1 is in living labor, the second part. There are two parts to Multitudo.
Page 242.
Politics and living labor.
Oh,
And it's preceded by love, Alma Venus. Yeah, our Venus.
242, okay, thank you.
Yeah, page 242 in the text, and it's 9.1, proposition 9.1. After he's gone through Leopardi, the great poet, he's very, very, very attuned to put it mildly. Yeah. So love on the previous page, since Josh mentioned it, is not pietas, 8.4, page 241, i.e. a power that refers to transcendence, nor is it simply amor, an aesthetic power that operates in an atomistic context and traverses it indefinitely. Love is biopolitical living labor. Biopolitical. So the switch, again, Beth, I mean, I know I'm giving a lot of historical reference points here for a reason, because I think it helps situate biopolitics of Foucault, and also both as descriptive as well as a new term, is taking the high ground from the old Marxist analysis, right? The biopolitical takes its point there, and this includes Foucault, and then ultimate Giorgio Agamben, who says that historical materialism is not enough, still making the same old mistakes. So Negri is also caught in that moment of the biopolitical. So this is lectures. Negri is giving lectures, to give you the frame in terms of chronology. He's giving the lectures on the Grundrisse in 78, 79. Foucault is giving the lectures to Collège de France on the birth of the biopolitical at the same time, right? And by the 80s, you have books. The Biopolitics by Roberto Esposito in Italy. There are a lot of people that start to think through the biopolitical. So people like Vicente Navarro, in Johns Hopkins, they start studying through, the medical institutions. What is the difference of the biopolitical moment in this? It becomes studies of thanatology too, the study of death, right? How is the statistics made? How does population control start? Things that are anathema somewhat to Marxist analysis, because Marxist analysis also wants to use the commodity and commodification always as a starting point, whereas they're working from the biosphere and the politics of life itself, right? I mean, I'm just saying, this is a different emphasis. I'm just trying to point out. I'm not saying I agree with this totally, but this is what's happening, and Negri is writing under, this guise, because you don't see him. He'll use the term from the Grundrisse general intellect that I put on the board, which is a very crucial concept. That's the brain. That's the great collective brain, the general intellect. So he's really looking at brain work here too, This is also at the edge of time. Precarity, going back to what you were saying. So look, try to think of it this way. They're really looking, Negri, Hart, in a much more limited way. Certainly, the European Marxists looking for agency here. They're looking for a new revolutionary subject. It's no longer the black feminist, right? It's no longer, quote, the working class. It's no longer this. So they're trying to really create the terms, right, in order to find out where does this new agent come from in this age of, overdetermined diversity, overdetermined identities, et cetera, et cetera.
Did they find it?
No, it's a good question.
I mean,
it's a good question.
Somebody asked me to submit something for the Seattle essay, and I was like, I don't want to get into. I feel like that was this a very fetishized moment that we. And so you're referring to that makes me think it's like.
Well, he writes this during that period.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure. I mean, he sees Seattle, but you also had uprisings. When did
Lots
you do your
of-
photographs in Paris? The last big strike.
2006.
Six. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah, no, there are lots of
Yeah.
I mean,
Genoa.
Genoa,
Genoa too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Quebec City.
But there were
Yeah.
big riots in Paris, and
That was
yeah,
the big one was in 2006.
Yeah.
Well, that was under Sarkozy. That was in the banlieues, right?
yeah.
That was after
Incredible.
the values, right? Before the values.
It was 4, I think.
Yeah, before 2000. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sarkozy was a little later than the values.
Oh, that was before
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So anyway, I mean, again, yes. I mean, have we found it? No, we haven't. But I mean, I look around the Bernie Sanders rally today, and I'm sure Phil can validate this. Mostly it was less white than you would expect, right? I mean, it was more 50%. Persons of color, different ethnicities, et cetera, et cetera.
It was still
It was Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, okay. Yeah, it was?
It was still majority.
Yeah, okay, now where I was standing. Yeah, maybe I just, got in the right spot. Yeah, anyway, yeah. White people shelter, much more, they try to get by you and they,
But yeah, I mean, I
Okay,
can
I'm
understand
yeah.
a conventional Marxist responding to that by saying, well, I mean, the working class is changing at the center of the capitalist world, but what about in the global south? They still make all our shit. And China, I mean, they're still factory workers. They still look like.
But again, that's a question of temporality. See, he understands this in terms of temporality.
Yeah.
Those are zones. That's not really going on in the advanced countries anymore. You see, so he's understanding these kind of zones that someone that lives in, say, parts of Peru or Bolivia is subjected to, 1930s type of factory labor that we no longer see in, quote, New York City, et cetera. Yeah, I think this is the way he would see this. These are temporal zones in a sense. So yes, the hidden abode of production, or the world is a workhouse in a sense to Negri. Yes, I mean he's not going to deny that, But at the same time, he's really trying to look, what is the agency in the advanced countries, at this sense, or what are you going to do in the proverbial service sector? How is that intervention to take place? So he comes up with a term called social worker. This is one of his agents, right? Yeah. And I'll try to locate that for you. I'll send it all in an email.
That's great.
Yeah,
He comes up with the term social worker,
Yeah.
right? Right? You know it, right? Yeah.
But if you could send out the site.
Yeah. Well, he comes up with a whole new category that the new agent is a social worker. Not in terms of just the professional social worker, but he's talking about the work in the
The social worker.
and worker, right. So this is one of the things he does. And then, of course, Multitudo, the reason I wanted to read is that they actually thought and think that this is a new term that, you could use instead of the people, right?
Yeah.
Power to the people, a new term instead of the masses, or building a critical mass base, that the multitudo is always constantly changing, right? Is indefinable, does not have static or conservative principle, development, right? So, yeah. So this is another thing he's trying to do here. Yeah, go ahead, I'm
But
listening.
within alienation, which is this,
Yeah,
I think, powerful lived theory. Alienation, I think, a lot of it resonates historically. I think it resonates in current moment. So it may be an old term, but it's
Right.
still. I mean, it still speaks to, I think, an experience that lots of people go through. So I mean,
instead of saying I'm feeling alienated from my work, from my family, people say I'm stressed.
yeah,
This is the new language in the
Yeah.
everyday, right? So then you have to ask the question, why are they not, why are we not really speaking in that old language? Why do we have these kind of terms now today that just say, I'm stressed?
It's depoliticization.
Yeah, and yes, and how does that come about, right? And then how does that play into the fetish, the new commodification of the world, right? And its consistent moment, and how does this feed the consumer society,
Yeah.
right? In a sense,
Yeah.
So this is important, and this is where I think people like Stiegler have it over the so-called. I mean, I think Stiegler is a Marxist, but a lot of people says he's anti-Marx, et cetera. But this is where he's looking at these processes that you become dominated, by the thing. The book of Stiegler that I think is very accessible and readable on this is the Re-Enchantment of the World. Yeah, it's a very nice little press. It's very short. I recommend it as of understanding what we're going through alongside of this book, Surveillance Capitalism, that I was looking at this morning, because she fills in some of the empirical evidence. He's not an empiricist at all, Stiegler. So yeah, the Re-Enchantment of the World, in which he talks about this in terms of, the new subject is no longer, the guy that works in the factory is only interested in what he can buy afterwards anymore. He's not really thinking about the workplace anymore. It's about the consumerism, Yeah, getting the Yankee tickets, getting the Mets tickets, something like that. But I mean, it would be good to study this, like I said, to put it to the test. I think, sometimes it's important, that the terms aren't adequate. Marx did not really speak about alienation much more in Capital, and one of the claims of the Althusserians, and to a degree they're right, to another degree they're wrong, Marx is giving up humanist language. It's really about the systemics of the system that's really going on at that point, right? And that there's no humanism in capitalism at all. Right, et cetera, and that this term alienation is lost, right? It's not there anymore. because you have to think of it, going back to what we were
Between the
saying,
economic and philosophical manuscripts and Capital, a
Yeah.
lot happens.
1848 to
Yeah,
1867.
but those
29
economic
years.
philosophical manuscripts, there's a lot on alienation in that.
Yes,
and
it
a
is.
lot of people find that sort of what Marshall Berman gave it to everybody at Passover dinner. I mean, that's a big, powerful text. So, I mean, are we saying it's
I
outmoded?
like Marshall, but
yeah,
but he was a Marxist humanist. Yeah,
what was wrong? Why?
no,
but?
nothing wrong with it. I said I liked him. But
Yeah. I don't know the but.
But,
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
the but is he stayed in the 1848 period and not the 1844 period, and didn't really graduate to 1867 to 1883. And a
So
lot
he-
changed.
So
right?
Federici's got a new book out, Re-Enchanting the World.
Called what? Re-Enchanting the World?
Yeah.
Really? Okay. Well, it's the same title as Stiegler, The Re-Enchantment of the World. She's saying re-enchanting is
Yeah.
participial.
Uh,
Okay, yeah.
Sorry.
Right? Yeah. No, but I mean, I hear what you're saying. You know, I understand that we have this tendency, what happened to the human being in all of this? But, you know, in a way, the human being was, you know, as Foucault said, man is an invention of recent date and one perhaps nearing its end. So in one way, a whole tendency of thought, the biopolitical, which replaced classical Marxist analysis, went that way.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to give you the historical background, not my own,
Yeah.
thinking about this.
Yeah.
You know, I think both are very rich.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm not trying to deny. I mean, the early Marx is a very smart man.
Yeah.
And he's militant as can be, and you know,
Yeah.
we know, we know all this. And the manifesto, to me, still holds up as a great document in which he talks about crisis, when he talks about the psychology of
Yeah.
the bourgeoisie and all
Yeah.
of that. And that's still, but for the Althusserians, 1845, when they begin to discover what ideology is and the
Yeah.
German ideology, that's a break.
Yeah.
But they consider, and again, going back to Beth's original question, there are ruptures here, you know, that we have a hard time going with because we're not reading this every day or in conversation with them, but he's trying to rupture from a previous language, you know, in this sense, right? So the book is called Time for Revolution, so time is crucial. What is the time, you know? I mean, you know, is it Bernie time? You know, as we talked about today, you know, this is not a revolution, but I mean, you know, it'll put a better face on America if it happens. I'm willing to support it for that reason.
Yeah.
You know, that I don't have to go around always saying, apologizing for this idiotic country. Yeah, at this point.
Yeah.
Beyond idiocy.
Beyond.
Beyond, yeah. Yeah, you got ghosts in the closet, John Bolton and Elliot Abrams, you know, telling us about what's going to happen in Venezuela. We got this fool Pompeo, you know, who, you know, should be the poster child for Weight Watchers, you know, and you know, I'm
He's
sorry,
waiting.
I'm not nasty. Right.
He's waiting for the rapture.
Yeah, he's waiting for the rapture. All of it. He and Pence. I can see them holding hands. Maybe Mimi Rogers will come back and do her little thing there. Yeah, and from the movies.
But leading
Right.
that parade
Yeah.
would be the liberals praying at the shrine of Mueller.
Yes. Yes. Oh
And
yeah.
the FBI.
I read the Times
And the
this morning.
CIA.
I swear, 70% of the first part of the Times is all on Michael Cohen.
Yeah,
70%.
yeah.
This is it. When you turn on TV at night, I'm going to give up cable. I'm
He's
so
gone from
disgusted.
being
No,
a
no.
scumbag to being a saint.
Fox and MSNBC,
Such a far
between the
distance.
two of them, you know, the defense of Trump and then against Trump. That's all you're getting. And the New York Times has turned into just a rag for anti-Trump. It's well written, it's better written, it's more depth at times. It unfolds. There's a good article on the numbers runners. I don't know if anybody saw that.
Oh,
It was
Godfather.
did you see that? It was very good on the back page of the Friday Times. And yeah, it was really good in the arts and leisure section. It was written by the daughter of a numbers runner from Harlem who actually put her through school. You saw that?
No,
It's very
she's
good.
been interviewed on
Yeah,
NPR.
very,
Yeah.
very good essay on number running, and you know that's how Malcolm X got arrested on Detroit Red. Yeah. Anyway, but going back to the subject matter, and this is crucial too, because you have to ask the question, and you weren't here last week, but we talked a little bit about that, what we were saying about Lenin earlier, and I think this again is a crucial way of understanding Negri. If we go back, you know, let's just go back to last week for a second. On page 227, right?
page 227.
Yeah,
Okay.
page 227, section 3.3. Leninism, when it poses itself the problem of the recomposition of the multitude, failed in its task in the instant that it defined dictatorship as the highest form of democracy. From this perspective, it participates in the history of modern sovereignty. All this becomes evident, or sovereignty, right. All this becomes evident when, independent of the genesis and the formidable success of the October Revolution, one considers that the industrial development, taken as the unit of measure, is the skeleton and the culprit of the Leninist theory of revolution. So he's trying to get away from this kind of thinking. So in some ways, to break, Yeah, it's not against Lenin. He understands what rupture in history it is, but he's showing here that it still is inscribed, if you will, in the history of modern sovereignty, right? That it's really still within the history of modern sovereignty. So they're really trying to get outside of all of this. Yeah, please.
And
yeah.
the notion of the subject in general, what you talked
Talk about bourgeoisie
in the beginning
the subject, yeah.
of this piece.
How do you feel today?
That's why you have to get rid of the humanism.
Yeah.
Because as long as you're tied to the notion of the subject as is constituted,
Right.
as he constitutes in the beginning, you're never going to get outside of the idea of capitalism
Right.
or the sovereign power,
Right.
essentially.
Right. Yeah, and going back to, again, 5.1 on 228, in the postmodern era, weak theory of sovereignty requires a form of pluralization and syndicalism or corporatism of the social as the condition of power over the multitude. Once one has recognized the social organization of diffuse webs of communication whose consistency is autonomous and that is subjected to a strong tension between territorial rootedness and the global market, this theory formulates the project of a process of re-centralization founded on the globally valid unit of monetary financial measure. He's really describing here the shift in 1973. Here, really, very, very well, I think. The articulation of the entrepreneurial territorialized forces and the reduction to a common measure on the global market must, however, arise through a dialectic of sovereignty that finds its guarantee in a supranational and/or imperial force. But at this point, sovereignty, far from being weak, becomes strong once again. And this is exactly what happened. Strengthening of World Bank, structural adjustment programs, globalization of poverty. Think about all this in terms of this that was not in that earlier, Leninist break, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he's really trying to think this through and bring us up to date. I think this is very important theoretically, that what he's doing here. So he says again that
So really, it's an evolution of the transcendental critique of the transcendental subject.
yes,
That's what he
indeed.
does.
Oh, yes. And
Shows where it's displaced to now.
Yes,
basically.
exactly. And in order to respond to the power of the multitude, sovereignty extends its center of gravity within deterritorialized horizons,
Yeah.
right, etc. Okay, we're going to take the Stonewall group and we'll make them all bankers, and they'll have nice houses in Greenwich Village, right? No, think about the levels of the co-optation, how this works so much, right? We're going to get married because we can get insurance policies, because of the courts things, etc. So in a way, this becomes trapped within, again, kind of representative power again, instead of, usurping it, undoing it, taking it on and building something, which is much more difficult to build something new. As you say, electoral politics, we come in, that's the easy way to do this stuff. That's the simple, way, but it's not going to do anything. You're not going to get transformative thinking out of the out of the Sanders campaign.
Yeah.
And watch the Clinton forces go with Kamala Harris. Watch this. How much is going to be put on a prosecutor too? And everybody's going to say she's a woman of color. All the you're going to go through this. And her father was a Marxist economist.
Yeah.
This is just true.
What fall from grace.
Yeah, exactly. How many people she put in prison?
Kamala Harris's father was a Marxist.
Yeah,
Jamaican. Donald Harris, Jamaican, radical in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Donald Harris is his name.
And he spoke out against her already.
Has he? I didn't know that. I'm glad to hear that. Excuse me, I'll never get a text again. I'm going to text my friend now. I can cut off a relationship now. I'm
Not
just
against her candidacy,
right.
but he lives in Jamaica, And he
Right.
objected to something she said characterizing Jamaica. She said something like, of course I'm for the legalization of marijuana. I'm from Jamaica, you know. And,
You're right.
and
They
he
hate- they hate
publicly
it.
objected to that, you know, characterization of everyone from Jamaica. So maybe he'll get more.
Yeah, let's hope so. Yeah, he was a good political economist in his day. You know, part of a very good group. Orlando Patterson and Donald Harris. All these people were together during that time. They all knew Stewart Hall. I mean, yeah, this was a real
What happened to
intellectual.
her?
Yeah, well, the mama got a hold of her. Excuse my language, but it's true. Yeah.
They lived in Montreal.
You're going to be a star. What's
Oh,
that?
it's
I'm
They
sorry?
lived
Montreal.
in Montreal. She divorced him and took the kids up to Montreal. from what I
Really?
understand.
Harris's
Really?
mother did this?
Yeah, took.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, maybe my property value will go up. Yeah. Yeah, now I'm for it. I'm just teasing.
I taught this morning. My brain's
Okay.
dead. I apologize.
Okay, it's okay.
Yeah. I'll
Okay.
see you guys soon.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, we'll see you on the 23rd. Thanks for stopping
Thank
by.
you,
Good to
guys.
see you.
Yeah.
Oh, and how much for the class?
Okay, you can catch me at the next one, okay?
Thank you,
All
guys.
right, good.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
See you soon, guys.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, we got off the text, so Ben's not gonna stay for a little while. We got to Camilla Harris. I understand, yeah. Anyway, so, I mean, I don't know, Beth, I mean, is it kind of coming a little bit more into focus? I mean, you know, or Josh, or?
Your comments were helpful too.
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah,
That's good.
Good, okay, good, yeah. I mean, I think, again, you know, he's trying to avoid what Adorno tries to do in a much more, I mean, for lack of a better term, higher philosophical plane, you know, not allow the thought to be co-opted,
Yeah.
you know, to make you work. Make your work and think it through, and also argue with it. You know, I mean, it's really about the explosions in the margin of the text that ultimately is whether the text has any kind of power. You know, what's going to go on in the margin, what are the questions about the text. So to me, you know, in this sense, I think there's a lot here to work with, right? You know, we talked last week, and Ben's left now, but, you know, precarity was already talked about in the Epicurean Swerve on page 230 in section 8.2 with the Cleaneman, right? That organizes the chaos of the multitude of singularities, the Cleaneman, the Swerve, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So you have this too. Then the linguistic cooperation, and I know I mentioned some of the work of Ferruccio Lundi, you know, Rossi Lundi, you know, who's done very good work on labor and semiotic homologies, you know, from the linguistic point of view. And again, look, we're dealing with very highly, I mean, look, nothing against a lot of the good programs in the United States, but this is, you know, first-rate education, you know, talking here, right? Who's also been part of militant organizations. Negri started in early 60s, you know, as a member of a group that worked with factory workers. They lived there. They worked with these people, theory all the time, etc. This is another person that was connected supposedly to the Rosa Brigado. You know, I mean, he denies it, but I mean, he was put in jail basically for this. You know, being this. So this is another a person that's written 2-3 books in prison. You know, as well. A very good book on Spinoza, on which this whole thing, and I mean, look, it's not a course on Negri, but again, Negri wrote a very good book on Spinoza called The Savage Anomaly, on constituted and constitutive power, and also on the perpetual problem in philosophy, which is you live temporally, this is why he does Edge of Time, in the plane of immanence and transcendence, because philosophy transcends time and transcendence. Yeah.
So,
I
I
was
mean-
with our friend Arto last night. Man, Heidegger's writing for people 100 years from now. This is Arto. I said, I see what you're saying here. Not for us imminent beings. Huh? Yeah. What were we going to say? I'm sorry.
Immanence is the Spinoza immanence.
Yeah, the plane of immanence is
Yeah.
is the now. You know what he refers to as the love, right? And all of this, right? And also the innovation, you know, that's going on. But you also have the eternal, right?
Right.
And the both outside and at the edge of time, right?
So he's maintaining both of those.
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And Spinoza is someone who supposedly transcends his time, even though working in the immanence
In the-
of that time, right? He's thinking through nature
That's what they
as
want.
naturing, which is kind of an anticipation of how now we view nature and how Marx viewed nature.
Mm-hmm.
So he's beginning to look at this in terms of those constellations. So this is always a moment, right?
And do you think that he talks about full time at one point? Is that a Benjamin kind of full time?
Kairos.
Yeah.
He's talking about kairos, which is a
Kairos.
religious term of full authentic time.
Okay.
You know, you experience time in its fullness, the fullness of the internal. You know, so this has been a problem with him. Why does he have to resort to that kind of language? Kairos is a term used by Paul Tillich and others. Yeah. Christian term. Yeah. Now, Paul Tillich is really good on this in a book called Systematic Theology. Paul Tillich was a socialist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he worked at Union Theological Seminary. Yeah, and, many years. He was actually, I think, one of the people that, got Cornel West interested in, theology and this kind of thing. Yeah. Among other, the politics from Sheldon Wolin, et cetera. But yeah. Tillich claimed that ontology studies being and the structure of being, whereas theology studies the meaning of being. This was his distinction between ontology and systematic theology, right? In his big book.
Being
Yeah.
versus.
Yeah. So kairos is a term that he's using, that he thinks that again, he's also in this book, and we didn't read all of it, but the other part of the book that's interesting is he's looking at poverty.
Mm-hmm.
Poverty in the St. Franciscan moment is very important to Negri at this point, which was, of course, a criticism, at some levels. Yeah. But it's a very Catholic country, to put it mildly. Right?
Yeah, I wouldn't be asking him to do this, but
Yeah,
does he address third world, worker issues?
Well, he's well aware of the globalization and its moment, yeah. And you see this all over Empire. There's a very good chapter in Empire and in Multitude on Fanon. I think it's chapter 4 of the Multitude book. It's a very, very good chapter on Fanon. I can send out some reference points for people that are interested. He and Hart go through a very interesting study of the wretched of the earth, the so-called third world liberation struggles, etc. I think the task is you have to think both, from the standpoint of the advanced, again, to go back to constituted power, in a sense, but also think that with the constitutive power, but also I think it's very important to think through, the third world not as separate, but part of this dynamic too. How do we begin to see this in a multiplicity of involvements and what's actually going on? We all know that these phones are the product of great wars in the Congo. We don't think about this every time we look at it, but this is the equivalent of 3 million people dead. Not just right on the phone, but on a mass production level.
Clothing and
Yeah, of course. If we begin to really think about this in terms of relations, we're not going to be able to eat tomorrow. If we really thought about that and we were really, quote, politically correct to the letter. That's why this is such a stupid term. To me, this politically correct kind of terminology, doesn't make any sense, ultimately. Because we don't have an understanding always of how this is working and how it feeds, and then how it feeds into decisions being made in the corridors of power, what's going to really happen here. They're licking their chops over 3 million North Korean consumers. That kind of discipline, party discipline. They're just like they licked their chops over China. Look what Mao produced in terms of disciplined workers. Can't wait to get a hold of these North Koreans. Be better than the Kia and the Hyundai, factories in the South, or Samsung, or whatever. You can imagine, huh? Made in North Korea. Yeah, going forward. Yeah. So yeah, unless you're thinking that way, instead of just thinking, oh, look at Rocket Man and Trump meeting each other, shaking hands with photo ops, there's so much more going on there. Yeah.
I think Kim was more interested in Vietnam and how they've structured their economy.
How they restructured.
Restructured their economy to fit in
Right.
with capitalist world.
Wasn't structured.
He
The
didn't, I
structure
don't think
was
he cared about
destroyed.
Trump at all. He
Yeah,
didn't
yeah.
expect anything from
Yeah,
that.
no, I know.
But,
That's probably true.
But he spent more time in Vietnam.
And 60 hours on the train.
Well, that too. But
I
he
like
was-
that.
The train's cool.
I'm sure he was studying.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah. Like Lenin comes
No
in
fear.
from Europe.
Like so
He
fierce.
comes in from, That's great.
The plane is never going to tragically crash.
And not one person raises the question of how many of these people were killed, in the DMs, in 1953 and before. How much the West damage they did to North Korea and why this man is the
millions.
way he is.
Millions.
Why the system is the way it is. There's no discussion about this at all.
No,
Well,
no
that-
historical.
Nothing.
And
no
it's also
context.
why they have
And how they
so
started
much in
them in the
common
90s.
with the Vietnamese. I mean,
Right.
both countries were separated after
Exactly.
World War II.
Exactly.
And both of them lost millions.
Exactly.
And now, one's capitalist and the other one is.
And the
according-
Maoist tendency was much greater both in Vietnam and in North Korea than the Russian tendency. I mean, it was very interesting than the Stalinist and the Khrushchevian tendency. Yeah.
The
Yeah, very
Vietnamese,
much. Yeah.
Vietnamese kind of hated the Chinese.
They hated the Chinese on the border.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They had a
Yeah,
war.
yeah. But in terms of
Small
Maoist
war.
guerrilla tactics,
Yeah.
they liked a lot.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think. Yeah. Ho Chi Minh was a photographer and a cook in Paris. That was his underground identity.
He
when was
washed
in there.
dishes here in New York.
Yes, that's true.
Oh.
Yeah. He figured General Giap figured out the Americans liked to bomb after they ate breakfast.
Oh, yeah.
They go to the toilet afterwards. They got to drop the bombs. Yeah, very funny.
Yeah.
Giap says we knew it's exactly the time that the B-52s would come. They like to do it after breakfast. They was very disappointed his son became a travel agent.
Yeah.
Giap's son. Yeah. I think he's one of my heroes. What a military genius
Oh, yeah.
this guy was. Yeah.
Yeah, he was.
But anyway, going back to this again, we live in this world of where all these things are not really talked about. It's this populist uprising. I mean, you can see this everywhere in terms of the slogan that the constitutive power is going to try to rise up, but without any historical understanding. This is why I think Stanley's doing the course. What does it mean to be left? Which I've encouraged. What does that really mean today? Because without education, and Kant is very good on this, you can have all the revolutions you want, but unless you have a revolution in thinking, it's just going to end up just the new boss is the same as the old boss in so many ways. And we've seen this in so many different places, right? This glorification of Mitterrand in 1980, right? Whenever a socialist government takes hold in the West,
Yeah.
et cetera. Right? Yeah. And with all due respect, I mean, she was pretty good, but when you see who she's playing off against, AOC, right, needs some historical background. I mean, she needs a handler. Yeah.
Yeah, but
I'm
she's
open. I'm open.
aggressively
Yeah.
anti-
I'm just kidding.
We'll sign you
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, sign me up.
Aggressively what?
she's aggressively anti-intellectual.
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
Aggressively.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
She says, I grew up in a working class family. We didn't need a whole bunch of books.
They're bougie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, she
Yeah,
worked
she's-
for a long time as a
yeah.
bartender. She probably had a bunch of intellectuals come in
Yeah.
and give her a hard time, so,
Yeah.
I don't
She
know.
was the
No,
1,000.
No, I
Actual
don't-
today was
29
a
or
hard
whatever.
time.
She won credit from the New York Times as the star of the committee.
Oversight.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
See, I was the only one who really asked the piece.
She was the only one who asked different questions and opened things up for follow-up. She's got the makings of a prosecutor, I think. Anyway, the Times put her on the front page as the
She didn't have much competition
No, the
in terms of the
competition was very-
levels of the
No, I mean,
questioning.
I mean,
I mean, that's another thing to look
Yeah.
at. in
yeah,
all
and
of
both
this.
Yeah.
parties.
Yeah.
would-
No, she's the one who
Yeah.
asked the best question.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah, and
opened
she's
things
got a
up.
really
Yeah.
good staff
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Like, who wrote those questions? I'm not going to assume that she did.
Well-
She has a crackerjack staff.
Well,
and
she said so.
pays them
Yeah.
well,
She said
better
so. She
than
said,
anyone else.
why, now people know why I pay my staff well, you know?
Good for her.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
You know.
It's okay.
But anyway, to go back to this whole question of, yeah, but the question is really, what does this mean? I mean, going forward, what does it mean to be socialist? Left, we're going to hear the word socialism barraged over the next, year and a half up to the election, right? And, the question is, it's going to be badgered around without any historical understanding. What's the difference between, this kind of socialism versus that kind of socialism? Where did the term originate? Who worked with it? Were Marx and Engels socialists? They weren't. They argued against the socialists.
Yeah.
Right, again, that's another thing too. The analysis was very superficial from the socialist community. The actually existing socialism, what did it yield? The difference between a Scandinavian and an Eastern European. What is the difference in terms of educational systems, et cetera. The Hungarian Film Academy, one of the hardest things to get into. They make some damn good films. Miklos Jansko was a first-rate filmmaker that came out of those programs, right? Yeah, yeah.
Of course, it's our right wing that's tries to collapse.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's the
two
left doing it
categories.
too, though. It's the
Yeah.
left doing it too, feeding into this, yeah.
Well,
Well,
yeah.
no, I think the socialists have tried to separate themselves from the communists. I don't think the left is doing that. The right is doing everything it can to collapse the two.
Oh, you mean to collapse
Yeah.
communist, socialist, and everything, yeah. Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, we'll see how
I mean,
it
good
plays
luck
out.
with
but-
that, with the younger group, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the problem is that, say, let's just take a hypothetical. If Bernie Sanders is elected, what does that really mean, ultimately? And say there's a new generation of younger people that are in these positions of House of Representatives, maybe a senator here and there that are very favorable to some kind of program. Does that mean the utility companies are taken over by the government?
Absolutely
No.
not.
The rail transportation system? No. You're talking about another kind of level of private-public partnerships where the private sector will get their teeth into it any way they can. And, what are going to be the safeguards? And what essentially, I mean, it might better on a Hegelian scale in terms of a little bit of a spiraling effect. You see a minimal amount of progress, right, for some people, which, could be good. I'm not arguing against that in terms of progress,
like,
but
the
ultimately
struggle
it's not a thing.
continues.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders is essentially where I told someone today that I was with, I said, what we're going to hear today is what my father heard in 1932. He voted for Roosevelt, right? He was a New Deal Democrat. And I said, we're going to hear this today. This is how far we've gone. The Roosevelt program may have been even more, riskier and more forward-looking. And so we're 96 years, 97 years, 87 years, from that. Yeah. So where have we gone?
Yeah,
In terms of the history
we've
of
lost so much.
not only modern sovereignty, but the modern welfare state. That's what they inaugurate. Yeah. He goes, let me tell them, we will raise Social Security. They're trying to take it down, but we will raise it. This
That's
is
Bernie
this
today.
is the time. Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually
Yeah.
pretty good. I was listening to it. Better
You
than
heard?
his-
Yeah.
better
Phil
than
and I
his
were
previous
there
ones.
before you came.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was a few minutes late because of the 2 train getting back was packed and
Yeah, I
slow.
imagine.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
the part I heard was had more bite to it than his last election speeches. I mean,
Although he was still really bad on, he made one reference to, we're not gonna fight endless wars, but,
Yeah,
That was about it.
yeah.
that was it.
That was it, and we're not gonna support Saudi Arabia to kill everybody in Yemen.
If you start voting
That I
in
did
any
hear.
presidential election, if you vote, right? I mean, that's again a trap for fools,
Yeah.
as Sartre says. But anyway, if you vote and you vote for either Sanders or any candidate, believe me, the foreign policy in general is not going to change. From
Yeah.
that of Trump,
Yeah,
from that
Trump
of
said
Bush,
we won the war.
from that
right?
of thing.
He's
And in
not
fact,
trying to fight wars either.
yeah,
we
yeah.
won.
Yeah.
Trump's looking at the bottom line. We're spending $100 million on this equipment in terms of North Korea. Why are we using it? We can use this to go, build the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a defensive move instead of an offensive move. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So this is I think very important to remember too, that you're not going to get any kind of progressive foreign policy out of any candidate that even gets close to the party nomination.
Yeah,
Look at
when-
what happened to Eugene McCarthy and some of our generation here. You know, who was anti-war, right? I mean, you know, it's a nice
Yeah.
upsurge, a couple of little
This is
things.
always our litany.
What?
This is like, there's no change, there's no hope, right?
Well, it's not a lit. I mean, I'm just no. I'm looking. What do you mean? A hope in electoral policy? I have no hope in
Yeah,
electoral
let's
politics.
look at Negri, because he gives us a little hope.
Yeah, well,
Just
I
thinking.
agree with you. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, the liberation is in the darkest places. Yeah, sometimes. You know, I mean, it's not this superficial thing. Only if we vote in Bernie Sanders or AOC
No
or
magic. I mean,
you know the Muslim
military
woman in
industrial
Minnesota
complex we're
or
up against.
whatever. Who does not come across so well as articulate.
No,
she's really not that sharp. I
Gets
mean,
a
at
little
least
off the rails
publicly,
from time to time.
she's got, you know, good visceral stuff,
Yeah.
but she doesn't come, and that's the thing.
Well, I think-
Why not put your best people forward if you're gonna start, you know, some kind of internal subversion or internal, you know, what we used to call structural inhabitation?
Who are you
Yeah, I'm not
talking
clear,
about?
I'm not sure.
Too
that-
Tom,
late,
too late.
From
Rashida.
Somalia, I think.
Rashida
That's what I'm
Tlaib.
Yeah, she's Somalian, and I'm
Ilhan
not sure
Omar?
English is her first language, so.
Ilhan, is that who is talking?
Ilhan.
No,
yeah,
the
yeah.
other
no,
one. No.
Rashida.
Oh,
Rashida.
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 Okay, from
Oh,
Michigan.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Michigan.
the one who's been reprimanded by Pelosi and
Oh,
blah,
yeah,
blah,
yeah.
blah.
Ilhan Omar has been fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm worried actually about her health and welfare. I
Does that mean
she-
you're worried for she get whacked?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, when you go up against Elliot Abrams,
Yeah.
He looks like death warmed over,
He's a
doesn't
ghoul.
he?
Oh my
Like
God.
the ghoul.
Yeah, he is a
himself.
ghoul.
The Grim Reaper
It looks
himself,
like he
right?
just
Yeah.
rose from the
Yeah,
dead,
yeah.
you know?
He did.
she
He did.
she also she kind of soft pedaled it, but she did confront Madeleine Albright yesterday.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
And on the
Another
issue
ghostly figure.
of
Yeah.
saying,
yeah.
why
Manchurian
can't these
candidate
people
there.
die?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Ghostly.
Madeline,
yes.
yes, I think it was worth it, Albright.
Right.
Yes, right.
Mm.
So I don't know, she's courageous.
Good,
And
good,
I'm afraid she's gonna get
Good,
knocked
good,
out.
good.
She's very courageous.
Yeah, okay.
You know, I think they'll go after her, you know, electorally, because I think her, you know, her district, she was in a three-way race, and the Somali community, of course, came out big time for her.
Yeah.
And that put her over the top. But, so they'll probably go after her electorally.
Well, they
you know, and
played
try
the
to-
anti-Semitism card now, so it's all downhill, you know.
So maybe to get back to the text, you know, the section on the decision is very important because this is where he's trying to stake out some theoretical ground. And this begins on page 2 of 48, is the constellation of bodies is that point when the common decides upon the common. The decision is born of the intensity of the common singularization of bodies, right? I mean, he's really trying to come out here, instead of the subject, the singular intensities. You know, to think of yourself as body, or bodies as multiplicity of singularities and intensities is a much more, I think, important way of looking at oneself than saying I'm a subject, I'm an individual, I'm this and that, right? In some ways. That's where he's really going here. And in terms of political, it's interesting. So, anyway, let's okay. All right. That sounds like the Alma Minerva.
Sweet.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
too early
Or
for
so.
that.
So he goes on to this phrase, the event of the decision. In order to answer this question, the question is, you know, is always multilaterable and leaning out over the void of being that might become full. What is the event? In order to answer this question, we must avoid losing the singularity of the decision and the transient value that constitutes its own. You know, you don't have to write this way, but I mean, in a certain way, he's really trying to break down the being, right, here to be reevaluated, to
Which
look
one are
at
you
what
on?
the
1.6?
1.6, yeah,
okay.
yeah. We must continue to view the production of the decision from below, and only in this way will it be possible to seize the event of the decision as such. So what do we mean by the event of the decision? What event are we talking about? evidently of an event that involves the common that decides upon the common. But every decision that the singularity takes involves the common in some way. The problem is no longer of demonstrating the ontological consistency of the decision, but rather of grasping the precise point where the decision innovates building, not by insisting on singularity, so much as on the experience of the decision, that is, in its creative expression. Only in this way will we be able to answer our question about the event of the decision. When we speak of the event of a common decision on the common, we're saying that the multitude of singularities accedes to a new level of power. In other words, one can say that the decision is the event that leads from one level of power to another, and the more powerful it is, the more open will be the field of our decision. The same can be if we exchange poverty and love for power. In no case can the decision be defined as a closure of possibilities as the power of section. On the contrary, it will have to be acknowledged as the opening of a new horizon of common power. So this is crucial. The event of the decision must open a new horizon. It has to be a new horizon, right? And the event of the decision is ethical when it constitutes new ontological power for the production of subjectivity. Again, subjectivity is not a given, it's being produced. It's being produced in this battle, this tension between constituted power and constitutive power. Okay? And then he's going to go, the ethical is no longer an existence of incident or an instance, an example of gladiatorial struggle of good against evil. The one who locate good in the infinite, place it in the transcendental horizon of judgment. And this is Plato to Kant. He's really taken on here in terms of philosophy. And from there, in an underhanded and hypocritical manner, they go on to treat the finitude of existence as evil. In this way, the existent, misled, experiences astonishment in the face of its own finitude. And people's consciences are moved in the face of an aeroplane accident or earthquake. There is no, that is to commiserate when faced with the death of an individual. This supposed evil is only the finite edge of being, and one speaks of the finite exactly as one does of the infinite. Once is subsumed in the eternal. Once has it been suppressed in this way, its justification becomes as banal as each sublimation is foolish. Evil cannot be confused with finitude, nor can it be attributed to. So-called evil is a condition and a border of existence that only the experience of passing beyond this border is able to define. Evil renders indignant, and ethics shapes itself by going beyond evil. This is very Nietzschean, and this is also a way of getting away from moral arguments on the left in many ways. Right? He's really trying to go there. So the man-machine individual death is only conceivable as the common decision of overcoming death. That is a struggle against death. It is only by taking up this choice of overcoming that the decision can be called ethical. So from that standpoint, the Hippocratic Oath that demands struggles without rest against death is more ethical than any other abstract axiology of the Mosaic Law. This is interesting. He takes the Hippocratic Oath as an ethical principle against that of the Ten Commandments. This is again a move against Kant and a move against the moral law, right? In terms of the formation of categories. Yeah. I mean, it's very sophisticated. It is no coincidence that medicine plays a preeminent role in the materialist tradition, that is, when the therapy of the body and the practice of happiness are fused. And that's the ancient Greeks. For Aristotle, the well-beingness, the happy life, is eudaimonia, which means that the soul is living in accordance with its principles, right? That's what our well-being is. That's what our happiness is, right? That's where good health is, yeah? It's not that you're just physically well off. It's you're living in accordance with the principles of your soul, right? In some ways. And I, again, think that a lot of quote-unquote, and I don't like this term, but mental illness, for lack of a better term, these kind of things, occurs to people because they're not living up to, that potential. This is really what happens in these breakdowns. They cannot, I mean, I know it's more complicated, but in some ways, the existential basis for this is that potential, that productivity is not being actualized. So capitalism feeds on mental illness, right? Feeds on it. right? In some ways. Produces and then feeds on it constantly, because the individual is foreclosed or blocked from developing the processes of separation and individuation. This is very, very crucial to remember. And he's very smart on this, where instead of honoring your father and your mother, thou shalt not kill, all these things, covet, all these motions of the Ten Commandments, he's taken this moral law that Kant, uses in the creation of the Critique of Pure Reason and the ethical laws, and he juxtaposes the Hippocratic Oath to that, as a principle of working for ethics and something that goes beyond the categories of being good or evil. Very interesting to me. So the medical model, again, apropos, he's read Canguillon, the book, The Normal and the Pathological. He's read a lot of this stuff. He knows his ancient philosophy, so he's using this against, quote unquote, the Kantian liberal tradition. Yeah. Okay, so the power that extends the common into the to come, and you can substitute here, that's Heidegger in some ways, Derrida, and certainly the not yet of Marc Bloch, all of which are future ecstasies that don't really have to do with progress, but with rupture, right? With breaks, couperet, with breaks. That constructs bodies in common on the edge of time, again, edge of time, he repeats again, that innovates the eternal, making it manifest. This is what we call the decision, the resoluteness, right? Innovates the eternal, making it manifest, right? Yeah. So, what is Marley? Exodus, right? Think about some of the songs we talk about. Great piece by a friend of mine, a jazz musician, jazz violinist, Exodus and Emancipation. Why does this still have this kind of power in some ways with the eternal, right? And at the edge of time. Why does this come back around? Can it be manifest again? Yeah, in a way. Yeah. And I mean, this is the hope, if you will, that's being held out from the Sanders movement, right? In some ways. This is what people are there for. They hope that some kind of return, right, of the standing up, right, is really there, and they would change things. Yeah, please, I'm listening.
It's interesting, just to go back, there's a new book, I think relatively new one, FDR by Dalek, and it was just reviewed in...
Yeah, I saw it, London Review of Books.
London Review of Books, very
yeah,
good.
yeah.
FDR was not the FDR we think of,
No.
he was.
He said there were two great actors of his period, himself and Orson Welles.
Himself. I think he told that to Orson Welles. So.
Right, yeah.
But basically, he didn't know much about economics. Was not a Keynesian.
Right.
Didn't believe in Keynesianism, except it turned out when it came to war Keynesianism, it was the only thing
that's all they could do.
that pulled the economy out.
Yeah, it had to. 38, yeah.
And basically, he really distrusted government. I mean, the New Deal came about, but he was not a driving force for a long time in a large expansion of government
Right.
by any means. So,
Right.
it's interesting the way he's been configured now as the New Dealer, Keynesian,
Right.
welfare state person, which he really wasn't. I mean,
Right.
Just an
Right.
advantage over Hoover, but
Right.
not a lot.
Yeah.
But I think that that's ideological, because if we keep the focus on FDR as the hero, then we don't have to look at what was happening in the streets, which is actually what
Absolutely,
forced
sure.
his hand
What
and
forced
what
his hand, right.
drove
Yeah.
policy. And we don't want feet in the street.
It's interesting. He referenced Huey Long as pushing him from the left to take on some of the New Deal
The
policies.
Kingfish himself.
The Kingfish, yeah, who I thought was just a populist demagogue, but
No, he had leftist tendencies.
yeah,
He had leftist tendencies.
yeah. Was he the chicken in every pot, or was that who?
That was the French king.
Every man a king.
Every man a king. I know.
No chicken.
No.
Filet mignon. Chateaubriand.
Every man a king. No.
Chicken. Come on. I'm sorry.
I think that was Hoover or Coolidge or somebody who said.
Yeah, maybe that was the chicken
One
in
of the
every pot. But
Republicans.
every man a king was the
Every man a king
Kingfish.
was the
And he,
Kingfish, right.
he basically brought down Standard Oil in some ways and created, it's totally corrupt ultimately.
Sure, yeah.
There's still, I have a friend of a family, when I was growing up, a family friend was, the family had the textbooks till eternity for the state of Louisiana. That Huey Long, they signed off in the 1930s. You know, they produce all the textbooks for the schools until time comes, until the rapture.
Is that what it was called?
No, but I mean, yeah, no,
But
the
it-
printing company was Moran Printing and the company, right, anyway. But he was good, I mean, you know, Seymour Weiss, and one of the great films, the first film, one of the great films on Huey Long is Every Man a King, I mean, All the King's Men by
Yeah,
Robert
yeah,
Penn Warren.
yeah.
The novel is worth reading for a study. I mean, Penn Warren is a great master of the psychological novel, as well as, you know, the political novel, as well as the film with Broderick Crawford. He won an Academy Award for winning, you know, yeah. So I know all kinds, I mean, being from that part of the world. And I knew T. Harry Williams, who was the major historian on Huey Long. He was at Louisiana State. Yeah. So they basically, they made Louisiana into a powerhouse oil state, you know, etc. And then his brother, you know, his son, and both sons, Russell Long was probably the most powerful Senate member, right? Head of the Senate Finance Committee, Russell K. Long, and Earl K. Long, his other son, became governor of Louisiana too. So the Long family has a very long history. And some people say that the assassination was pulled off because Huey Long might have been able to beat Roosevelt in '36 because of the Depression in the, I mean, that's one
Yeah, it wouldn't
speculation
surprise
out
me,
there,
no.
you know, especially from people from Louisiana.
Yeah.
That would said, you know, they would,
Yeah.
you know, figure this. But yeah, no, it's good, yeah. Huey Long was very, very important, a real forgotten populist figure in, you know, but it's a left populist.
Yeah.
Left populist. Yeah.
he's
And
the-
extremely shrewd politically, extremely, yeah.
Because he's depicted as a right populist.
Yeah, no,
He was
not
his
especially.
popular
No, he
imagination,
paved
but he isn't.
roads, he got many jobs for people. You know who capitalized on him was Edwin Edwards, who was the governor of Louisiana 5 times, you know, totally corrupt too, but he delivered, you know, jobs, and I mean, he's like an icon to many of the people there. I mean, he got elected, he's the one that beat David Duke, I told you the story, the bumper sticker,
Vote for the
vote
crook."
for the crook. It's important. So you vote for Edwin Edwards against the racist Klan people, you know, David Duke.
The crook,
Yeah, vote for the crook.
crook opposed to the Klan.
Yeah. And he comes out of jail, he's 70 something, this is sexist, but it's funny, anyway. He comes out of jail, he comes out of jail at 75 years old, he marries a 29-year-old woman, and everybody, she married for money. It turns out she had much more money than he ever dreamed of, you know, so it's kind of funny the way Edwin Edwards was really a very charismatic character, you know, who played on the Huey Long moment. So Louisiana politics has all kinds of characters like this, you know, much like New York, but down there it's funny because it's out in the open all the time. They don't hide so well, you know. Yeah. But yeah, Huey Long, he pushed him to the left. Yeah, definitely. All right, let's go back to this. This is a very interesting section, I think, as well. So the man machine and the Mosaic law. A power in the to come constructs bodies in common on the edge of time, innovates the eternal by making it manifest. 2:6, this is what we call the decision, right? The innovation of the eternal, making it manifest. Yeah, okay? So, and we mean the event in its singularity. Okay, then he goes through a nice little thing, and I think this is important for Marxist philosophy to breathe this kind of section very, very crucially. In dialectical philosophy, the event of the decision participates in the metaphysics of dialectical supersession, Affenburg. We've talked about this as the Hegelian term of retaining, moving higher to a higher plane, and et cetera, but also retaining is part of it. That is the sublimation of negation, right? Good. Characterized in this way, the event of the decision does not comply with the conditions we have proposed as much as the Affenburg is a transvaluation that conserves, i.e., which is a moment of logical continuity. And I wish Beth was here. I mean, maybe I should wait for her to come back. But this is very important. I'll go back over. The decision and transvaluation are thus drowned out in the effective necessity of the world because rationality and reality are placed under the sign of equivalence. What he's referring there to is the Hegelian. The real is the rational, and the rational is the real, which is an ongoing principle throughout the phenomenology. The rational, the real is the rational, and the rational is the real, right? And this is it. So singularity is extinguished. There is no more decision. What happens is the real becomes absorbed, suppressed, and moving towards the rational, right? To the rational, right? Reason becomes supreme here. This Negri, and it's a logical continuity in Hegel as well. It's very organic and logically continuous, right? Whereas Negri is trying to rupture from this. So this is why he's predicating on this. So, secondly, in dialectical materialism, and of course this is code for both, the philosophy of dialectic, but also Stalinism in some ways, the process of the decision is described in the same way. We're on a 3.1 and 3.2, which is kind of important with the Hegelian dialectical philosophies, how Negri is going to rupture from that. Okay? It organizes itself on the basis of a mechanical passage, and this is another principle of dialectics, right? The method, and maybe I should do this too. See. So you have the Offenburg, which is predicated on the negation, right? This is the Hegelian spiraling dialectic, right? Which suppresses, elevates, moves to a higher plane, right? But always leaves a residue and is part of the logical continuity. This is all part of dialectics. What dialectics is, right? So one, the methodology of the Hegelian, right? Predicated on this determinate negation that goes, the sublimation of negation, right? Sublimation of negation. And secondly, the old dialectical maneuver of the movement from quantity to quality. This is all part of measure, right? A dialectic of measure. So that he's talking about too. In the second part, he talks about it observes the decision, right? But it confuses it all the more the same, right? That this movement of the Offenburg from quantity to quality confuses this process, according to Negri. So despite my knocking it, negative thought, although it observes, this is 3.3, the decision from itself on the edge of being, on the precipice of a desperate nakedness, we get the poetics now, understood to the singular location where destiny is decided, is also dialectic, right? Okay? So negative thought, right, understood the singular location where destiny, fate, is decided, is also dialectical. Right? That edgewise thinking moment. Alongside the sophisticated dialectical condition, there is, in addition to the definition of the decision, a slide towards the negation, in any case an underestimation of plenitude, without which the decision cannot even be conceived. There may be decision here, but you have lost the materialist event. So also, right, any slide, right, if you will, right, of negative thought, sliding, right? Any of this that happens, right? You've lost the event, the dialectical event. That event that becomes manifest of singularity and innovation, where the innovation and eternity come together. Okay? So kind of think of this, under the auspices of event equals this, right? So the Offenburg, the sublimation of the negative, the transformation of quantity to quality and measure in the dialectic, and negative thought as a sliding, if you will use psychoanalytic nature, that language, a kind of slippage, right, or a sliding signifier, a floating signifier, is not enough. You lose the event of a materialist event, right? So he's critiquing here both idealism and, traditional Marxism, in the sense that they're going to talk about this, right? This is part of logical consistency. This goes back, what he talks about earlier of the history of modern sovereignty, that it can be recapitulated into these moments, that it's not subversive, it's not undergoing any kind of change, right? It's just like reading a historical narrative once upon a time. It's not really, producing new concepts or new ideas, right? In a sense. So he's going through. So dialectic, in as much as it forms transcendental thinking, denies the decision the power to generate out of nothing and to produce plenitude, fullness of being in the void against the void, right? And then dialectics, insofar it is of the capitalist, bourgeois, or in a socialist form. So Negri is saying that the bourgeois, right, revolution and the socialist revolution is basically thinking the same in these kind of categories. It's interesting here, right? Is incapable of grasping the power of the relation of poverty and the love in the decision, right? It's still the same thinking of power is going on in the Mitterrand government, right? Or really even in somewhat the Allende power government, right? In terms of the social, as it is in the bourgeois. So this is interesting, the way he goes about this to kind of, shake up, these distinctions and things that are played out in the tradition. I like this part very much, to my mind. Yeah.
There's an interesting vignette in that Chris Marker movie.
The Grin Without a Cat?
Yeah,
Yeah.
where he shows Salvador Allende addressing the workers, telling them, now, you can't get paid more because we have to really work hard. And,
Wow.
I mean...
I don't remember that from the.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's one where some of his
Wow.
Yeah.
supporters go to the factories, and they want to arm the workers, and he's saying, well, we can't do that because we're dependent on foreign investment, and foreign investment will dry up if we arm the workers and take over.
What's the
factories.
area code to Illinois?
Pardon me?
No, I'm just kidding.
No. So,
Chicago
I don't-
boys, yeah.
I don't know if that's part of the same movement. I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, you see what Negri's
Yeah.
doing. I mean, that's the point here.
Yeah.
You have historical examples of where the bourgeois and the socialist are thinking on the same lines,
Mhm.
vis-a-vis power and the event, right? In many ways. Again, he's trying to look at the materialist event as that breakthrough, right? And again, that breakthrough is both eternal and innovative. And he's trying to get to that space, if you will, where they can be innovative. You have to think that space, right? And this is why he uses terms like void, yeah? Why he uses these terms, plenitude, right? And he's using, again, the background here, again, is the Franciscan moment of the poverty, right? And then the love, right? Together. This is where he's going to go in terms of new categories, right? In order to upend the traditional form. So anyway, let's go on. So this is the decision again. So this is an argument against dialectics, especially Hegelian dialectics. Not enough. Not enough for him. And then, throw it out, right? In some ways. There's an escape from the Hegelian dialectic here, attempted. And I should give, I'll try to see if I have there's a very good, Bill Maker was his name, he was at the New School in the 70s. He wrote a really nice piece on dialectics in the Grundrisse. See if I can find it. A little nice précis of about 6 to 8 pages, about these kind of matters, about, how do you escape the Hegelian dialectic, in some ways. All right. In the materialist tradition, the ontological definition of the decision has frequently been missed. The irreducible and singular quality of a clinamen, right? Again, the swerve, right? In the Latinate form, in the Lucretian sense, that intervenes in the eternal precipitation of atoms has not been grasped. So we have not really grasped contingency, the swerve, right, or precarity yet. We really haven't, right? This lack is particularly evident in the succession of attempts to solve the problem that goes from Nietzsche through Deleuze by the way of Bergson. This is what I meant earlier, Beth, by he's being baptized in the river, outside of his earlier, thinking, which was a kind of Spinozist Marxism, but it's even getting more and more, deeper into Deleuze. And in this tradition, which despite everything inaugurates postmodern philosophy, the trigger of the decision is nothing other than the limit to which the infinite acts of a will to power, that's obviously Nietzsche, or of an élan vital, that's of course Bergson, tend, however these are characterized. Evidently, this conception approximates to the intensity of the decision in the plenitude of being, and the Klineman is given a subjective determination within the framework of post-Spinozism. But nothing bestows meaning on this process of the decision. It revolves upon itself unless it is merely rejoicing in the banal duration of life. But why should it not be celebrated for itself? Okay, so again, here he's going to go through three who are considered, I consider Nietzsche a dialectical thinker, but certainly Bergson and Deleuze are kind of critiquing dialectics throughout, and he's obviously been influenced by Deleuze's Nietzsche reading, right? Nietzsche and philosophy, which is a very non-dialectical approach, right? And this is about, Bergson, I know we haven't read this here, and you probably never really read Bergson, but Bergson is really talking about the movement of matter in his philosophy. These are really theses about movement and stuff going on in that context. However, let us suppose we can grasp the decision in the midst of an open context of micro-decisions as occurs within these authors. In this case, the Klineman is the result of innumerable micro-decisions. But although materialist vitalism correctly alludes to the production of resistance and to the dynamic of a becoming multitude of singularities, it nevertheless risks wrapping itself in the sophisms of a bad infinity. It would go on in this bad eternity, a bad infinity out of this. In Hegel, you have both the good and the bad infinities. And the bad infinity is where you really get lost. Trump. This is what the New York Times, really in a way, philosophically speaking, if you look at this from the standpoint of the mountain of Hegel, if you will, the New York Times and all the press about Trump is indulged in bad infinity. This is really what they're doing, right? It is right, this kind of infinite thing that they're going to continually axe against, talk about, etc., etc. And that's its logic, right, in a sense. It has nothing to do with real events, the materialist event, etc., the decision. Yeah.
It has nothing to do with changing anything because
of course not.
It just ingrains among Trump's supporters.
Of course.
All of their enemies and all of their hatreds.
Yeah, they're feeding the Fox News network and the base.
Yeah.
When you really think about it, that's the feeding. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see it in my cousins. I want guaranteed profit, not guaranteed income. Yeah, I have a cousin that, business people.
Works for Fox News?
I want a government, that's what they watch, Fox News in the morning.
Oh, they watch
it?
it?
Yeah, they sit in New Orleans and they sit around and they call me.
Oh.
Yeah. So is this the CIA? Good morning. Yeah. Listen, I'm getting my extra cup of coffee here.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway, yeah.
Good to keep in
So
touch
this is the way they talk about it. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. And keep your enemies closer.
Yeah.
I had to laugh, because I'm talking about Bernie Sanders. I'm interested in guaranteed profit. This is the way these people think, automatically. You bait them a little bit. Hey, I'm for guaranteed profit. Guaranteed income. Come on.
Well, guaranteed demand leads to guaranteed profit.
Yes,
Basically.
absolutely. Yes. So anyway, so the process is celebrated for that. Let's suppose we can grasp in the middle of micro decisions, etc. Anyway, the premises of postmodernity, in a way, he's kind of trying to juxtapose here, and this is a very long, again story, but the postmodern on the one side, right, versus the materialist. The classical materialist position, right? Sorry. He's trying to play off these two. And in a way, make a case for this, that this has to be absorbed for us to understand where we are. Vis-a-vis Lyotard, which he knows very well, Deleuze's readings of Bergson and Nietzsche, et cetera, et cetera. That the Hegelian system, the grand narrative, if you will, because Hegel is part of that, the grand narrative is also the story of the proletariat. He's trying to get away from this as well, right? This Hegelian Marxism that has been so predominant, you know, in the especially in Europe, and you know, somewhat here too, right? But especially in Europe. Okay, so let me go back to this for. What I really want to get to is the next page. So the decision and all that. Go over to 5.1 for a sense. The common decision, ancient materialism. Ancient materialism, of course, in 4.3 refers to both Epicurus, Democritus, and Lysippicus, and certainly Lucretius to a degree, about the common decision. And then does the other history of materialist thought offers useful elements for the construction of the definition we are seeking. So he poses this question, as I mentioned to you, Negri reads the history of philosophy. You have the dominance from Hobbes to Hegel versus that of Machiavelli, Spinoza, and Nietzsche, the subterranean. Right? So he's going to go back to Machiavelli. Both in its singular, we must consider the Machiavellian conception of the decision as a generator of temporality to be incomplete. It nevertheless appears to be the foundation for any possible definition of the decision. Now, one of the best chapters of the book Insurgency, which I recommend of Negri's, if you're going to read one book and you want a really good scope of his political and social philosophy, it's called Insurgencies. And in that chapter, he has a very beautiful chapter on Machiavelli, in which this is elaborated much more, you know, deeply. So anyway, the foundation, the constituent conception of temporality opens itself to the immeasurable. It is a decision that it is, at one and the same time, singular and common. This goes back to what I talked about a little earlier, the dual perspectivism. You know, one must be of the people and also rule over the people. The dual perspective from the valley up to the mountain, and then from the mountain panoramically over the valley and the people. You know, and put it in popular culture terms, all along the Watchtower. You know, written by Dylan, popularized by Hendricks, right? You know, all along the Watchtower, princes keep their view, right? Anyways, right? Yeah, so he's looking at that in terms of a double movement from the people, but also the power over the people. And he's picking up, I think, this language of the constitutive power and the constituted power from that, from Machiavelli. This is where the origin of the thought is. So then 5.2. Marx's theory of the class struggle, and this is interesting and this is worthy of really thinking about, is as constituent of the world of life, reiterates the intensity of the Machiavellian notion of the singular and the common political decision, extending it into historical time. Okay? No longer eternal time, historical time. And that's a nice nod to Althusser. But Marx's theory is hampered by so many counteracting tendencies that only by passing, and he puts this in inverted commas, beyond Marx, is Marxism able to confront the productive dimensions of postmodernity and decide upon the liberation of the living from dead labor. So again, look, the project here in this section, Living Labor, is always to talk about living versus dead labor, right? Really, in a way. Because most of what we do today and what we see is dead labor.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Here
it's
it is.
right here. You're looking at it right here. Yeah, and the phones, all this stuff, everything we're you know, in terms of the object world, or the thing world, right? So anyway, otherwise, there's always a moment in Marxism where dead labor dialectical returns to devour living labor like a ravenous hydra. Good island to go to, by the way, Greece. Not the Hydra head, but the Hydra. It's a beautiful island. You can take a nice hydroplane from, from Athens there. All right. So, the militant experience of the communist revolution in the 19th and 20th century often prefigured the biopolitical structure of the ontological decision. This is interesting. He goes back to historical reference points of this, and of course, 1871 is going to play out wonderfully here, right? In the practical experience of proletarian insurrections, it was not so much a case of ideological models, interesting enough, such much as a transvaluation of desire and of love and of living labor by the multitude. Okay? So it's not ideological warfare for Negri in terms of this kind of, these communist revolutions of the past. I mean, you can take issue with this, but it's interesting. It is in this light that the communist revolutions, whatever convulsions they underwent, or whatever heterogenesis or heteronomy of ends they were subjected to, can never be assimilated to totalitarian experiences. And this is a kind of, leave Stalin alone, etc. And all comparisons
Stalin
or
was no
analogies between communism and fascism is insubstantial and infamous. Interesting. Foucault attempted to trace the processes constitutive of the biopolitical world, pressing forward in the formulation of the telos of the common, conceived not as a dialectical result, but as a genealogical production. I don't know if some of you were there, right, when I did that thing, the difference between the dialectical approach and the genealogical, when we were doing Nietzsche, and a little bit with Heidegger,
With
too.
Heidegger, I
The
think, yeah.
genealogical, the dialectical, and the historicity. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because he's now going to kind of go to the level of the Foucaultian genealogy, genealogical approach, which is very interesting in a way because it's going to study singularity and intensities versus just class and class relations, right? In a way. So this is kind of upsetting in some ways the original theories of class. And this is something that for those of you that'll sit in on Stanley's class, when he reads his chapter 2 of how class works, this could be a subject matter, in terms of, where is their class today? Because Stanley really talks about class as movement, right? Not only as just class as a fixed entity, and the class movements of the black freedom movements, right? Black power movements, the feminist movement, the disabled movement, and of course the workers' movements, right? So he goes through this. Yeah, I'm listening. Yeah.
Yeah,
go
I mean,
ahead. Yeah,
Pelias was kind of like class is what class does.
Yes, that's true, yeah.
Yeah.
And in Poulantzas is very important to take away the language of it's the 1%. I mean, I hope I get a chance through our friend Heather Godney to talk to Sanders, because that's what I like to say. The 1% is full of class fractions. They don't all get along. It's not this unified body. They're unified in terms of the profit, guaranteed profit, and guaranteed continuation of their riches and more and more and more. But they're not on the same page, really, a lot of times. Because they're
Especially
fractions.
now.
Yeah, you have the fossil fuel people, the petrochemical people, the technocratic capital. You have all kinds of different capital out there that is really,
In the national security
working.
state.
Yes, of course. Well, that's cybersecurity. Yeah, cyber state.
But
Yeah,
they're also blending together. I mean, it used to be the distinction between national capital and international or foreign
Yes,
capital.
that's right.
Now
No such thing.
there's no distinction
No,
at
the
all.
only distinction is offshore versus onshore.
Something like that. And offshore could be anything.
Yes, indeed. That's right. That's right. So anyway, I think this is interesting, but who is able to explain the breakdown of Foucault's research program? I think he's referring to, when it went to governmentality instead of the biopolitical that went on with Foucault in the late. But I really recommend, if you really want an exercise in what a great seminar could be, and Foucault only wanted 200 people. There were thousands of people that attended these things. But the Society Against the State, the sections on security and population and territory, all of these lectures, the abnormal, which is a play on basically Canguilhem stuff. He did a whole seminar on the abnormal. These were all his Collège de France lectures that are all available now
These are
in
in the
English.
Biopolitics book, right?
No. The Biopolitics is just one of many seminars. Yeah, many seminars. Biopolitics was the late 70s. Early 70s was the abnormal. He was very interested in the anti-psychiatry movements and all this. He was finishing up Madness and Civilization, and he was going with this. Then he went security, territory, population, over the assassinations that were going on in Paris, post May of '68, and the police state that was enacted, during the second part of the Gaullist regime into Giscard d'Estaing, into that period, and then he did the birth of the biopolitical, and then some stuff on society must be defended, on the surveillance state. Yeah. So there's a lot of good, but the research program, according to Negri, broke down. But Foucault died, I mean, in a way, the history of sexuality, he said he became very bored with it. He didn't want to continue it. He only did 3 of a projected 10 volumes. And, there's a very good little semiotext book, Marx and Foucault, which is a series of interviews with Italian Marxists on his relationship to labor and labor power in terms of Foucault. So just, some marginal references here. So what is the singular event of the decision upon the common? It is the triumph of love that surges up from the multitude of the poor, embodying itself in the singularity. Now you can take issue with this, of course. An event that could not be any more material, any more full than it really is. It is an event of generation. And if Spinoza naturalized love, we can now see it act in biopolitical terms, that is, once generating singularity and in common. Okay? So this becomes a crucial term for him, love. Right? If this event of love is radical, it is so because it is given as a power to generate on the temporal edge of being, and that renders the existent immeasurable, moving beyond itself. If it to generate is to make the existent immeasurable, it is also to recompose singularity in the multitude. For it is within the multitude that the biopolitical subject of generation is constructed through language and cooperation. Here the event of the decision posits the subject in the multitude as the immeasurable and recomposed singularities. It is evident that the subject is immeasurable, and nothing can substantiate it. It is in this way that temporality governs. If you can't fix an identity, if you can't fix those singularities, etc., right, you are relegated to time, to temporalization, right? Yeah, okay, no problem. Yeah. So, in the biopolitical, he defines his terms well. Generation means both love and living labor, and distinguishes them because one and the other are creations of being. Generation, the act of deciding to generate, is one and the same thing when it resists and when it produces, when it gives itself as singular and eternal intensive insistence, and when it unfolds as subjective and innovative constitutive power. It decides within the temporality of the establishment of the common. If exploitation or exclusion forms a blockage, and this would be foreclosure, of course, in generation, resistance to biopolitical exploitation is transvalued when it challenges the order that the organization of exploitation determines. It is thus the revolt of, is thus the revolt of the multitude an act of generation. Yes, in so much as it reveals the decision of the material telos of the common. What is the ultimate goal and objective of the common. The liberty and equality of the subjects, that is, modernity, conceives of only in terms of a vulgar formalism, or here rediscovered in the common tension of generation. You see how he's trying to get out of the language of the French Revolution, the history of modern sovereignty. Mm-hmm. Modernity conceives of liberty and equality of the subjects, right? Is here rediscovered in the common tension of generation. It is this tension, is resistance and constituent power, that prohibits all forms of nationalism, racism, and denies all material and or ideological limits to biological liberty. The power of love does not only determine resistance and revolt, it also extended in the form of an event and a decision across the complex whole of the biopolitical field. Within this field, the event decision must be considered at least along 2 ontological dispositifs that are expressed in the biopolitical field. The first is that of the metamorphosis of bodies, and the second in that of the revolution of the constitution of the common. How do we see commonality, the common in a very different way. I mean, in a way, how do bodies change, right, in the biopolitical field when this resistance starts to happen, this power and resistance. So the ensemble of sensorial, perceptive, and mental mutations the bodies themselves produce through the direct experience of the innovation of the world life within the new machines and the new machine Umwelt is environment, right? Within production and reproduction in the metropolises, the cosmos produced by a permanent process of deterritorialization. Metamorphosis is biopolitical generation. Right? By constitution of the common, I convene the ensemble of transformations of the biopolitical common within which the bodies and singularities present themselves as subjects. These constitutions experience as new meanings of biopolitical language, both productive and ethico-political. And then the subjective event of the common decision participates creatively in these disputies. I'm going to go down the page. The Marxists who followed Marx. Marx was well advanced in the genealogical description of the transformations of the common determined by the political and productive technologies. The Marxists who followed him were far more timid, with the exception of the thinking of the post-1968 workerism, which formulated with great clarity the thematics of a new subjectivity through the analysis of struggles. It fell for Foucault to take up this thread again, unwinding it in the construction of the technologies of the self. So it's really this group, right, that is able to see, right, the new subjectivity, by analyzing struggle, not by using textbook terms such as alienation, rates of exploitation, et cetera, in the struggles themselves. Again, he's referring to the group around himself, Piperno, Tronti, et cetera, right? They're coming out, yeah? So, all right, so love, that is living labor, in a way, love becomes living labor against dead love, yeah? In a relationship that links it to the power of poverty and the exposure of one and the other on the edge of time so as to create new being, is thus machine and motor, right, of the subjective dispositions of the biopolitic. The common context is open. It is the technology of love that go to work in the passage from the multitude to subjectivity. The event is visible here in these dimensions, the ethical question posed again, but principally we discover the question of the decision, or more precisely, that of the ethical question in the form of the decision, which is what we were seeking when we asked what the event decision was. So he's kind of trying to come back propositionally, obviously full circle here, right? Okay. Any questions or thought about this? I mean, I try to map it out, So, there's this attack on dialectics, there's this attack on the traditional class struggle, right? That's happening, right? He's talking now about a new notion of generation, which is both love and living labor together, right? That's what generation is, right? In terms of this moment. The relationship of the common, right, to this. How do you produce a new subjectivity, right? A revolutionary subjectivity, and what ultimately is, what really ultimately is this event decision, going forward.
Can
So,
you say more about that term, event decision?
The which one? I'm sorry.
Event decision.
Yeah, well, he's talking about the event decision again as part about making that decision for the edge of time, right, at the edge of time, as well as the innovative, making the innovation happen. He does not think if you're trapped within the old language, right, and you're only fighting, of course, electoral politics being one example among many, labor unions that go to contract bargaining sessions. The collective bargaining sessions is also part of this history of modern sovereignty, right? It can be recaptured, it can be re-represented, right, in terms of a movement. So the only break from that is in this event decision of where you're at the edge of time, which would really mean a rupture, rupture or a break with time, a discontinuity, if you will. Because what he's critiquing here in Hegel and the tradition is this continuity, right? We're so conditioned to think in terms of continuous time, continuity, chronological time, all these kind of things that are built into the political economy. When we get to this level of the ontological and the break, from this kind of, daily rhythm, if you will, or daily sequences and sequential time, that we get kind of lost, right, in a way. But that's what he wants. He thinks that that's where the innovative is going to be. That's where the multitude will ultimately lead to a new kind of singularity, in a sense. So you're able to really see what's being reproduced in the system, much like Benjamin in a different way. This is more directly political, but where Benjamin talks about the mechanical work of art, that basically it's almost predictable ultimately what we're going to get out of this, right? It technically reproduced as always. We already know what's going to happen. So it's really, in some senses, the contingency, the unexpected, the unplanned, right? In many ways. He doesn't use language like irrational and this kind of stuff. That's not his dynamic.
So his reference is to the event.
To the event, right.
And not to any continuum.
Not to a continuum, singular event. It's really about both the generation that both love and living labor are participating in. To generating a new innovative moment. The Paris Commune becomes one of his examples, by the way, later on, of this kind of event. And for Badiou, the events are the French Revolution, the Paris Commune, the Bolshevik Revolution in May of '68. These are the events. For Heidegger, it's an appropriation, it's a happening. The event, the Ereignis, is a happening of which, that happening is really a return to the intuitive grasp of the things, after all the conceptual baggage is stripped apart, after working through. That's what deconstruction tries to do. It tries to deconstruct, locate concept formation, unpack those concepts so that we can get back to a kind of more direct experience of the things themselves. That's what I'm trying to do here. Yeah. So you're looking, basically, is if you think of, this is like a thinking and feeling and willing being, right? You're looking at kind of rewiring, right, in a way, by undoing, short-circuiting all the previous, conditioning, into this edge of time where you can be innovative and different, right? Or the system, it can be absorbed immediately, This is the problem with a Hegelian dialectic for a lot of people, that it can absorb any kind of, any kind of resistance to it. Can be brought back into the system. Even if you're Zarathustra, Ben's no longer here, but Zarathustra walking and, in the night of the Hegelian owl, still trying to be trapped and brought back in. Right? So the world spirit is capitalism. World historic spirit, in Hegel's sense, is the unfolding of the Napoleonic Empire, but it's really world historical spirit. That's what we're reading every day. The morning prayer is the morning newspaper, because the world historical spirit is unfolding. Negri wants to go beyond that. He's trying to build a movement, or he's trying to theorize, new types of agency going forward, right? And in so many ways, right? So,
Michael, is he
Yeah.
he throwing out? I get that he's throwing out Hegelian dialectical.
yeah.
Is he throwing out dialectical thinking like Marx took it and?
Well, I
and
think his
used it in a
materialist
different way?
dialectic he's looking at, but is looking at it more from the standpoint of an Althuserian rupture, into a new kind of dialectical thinking than the old, what he did with Hegel with the Aufhebung of the retention. These guys in the postmodern tradition, they're terrorists. I'll put that, in the good sense. They don't really want to get back to this religiosity or any residue, right, in a sense. So they're trying to overcome Hegel in this way. So when he sees little things that are going on in dialectical materialism, such as the transformation of quantity into quality, right, and this other movement of sublimation of the negative, and all these kind of things, that he's trying to create a new dialectical movement, right, a new dialectical movement that is really predicated more on singularity rather than the particular being reconstituted by the universal, which is what Hegel is constantly doing. Whereas the singularity here, how that singularity, how you can move from the multiplicity, the multiple, the many, back to the one, right? To the singularity. And how does this form a production of new subjectivity? He does not think this is possible in terms of new subjectivity under the traditional Hegelian and even Hegelian Marxist dialectics. Yeah. Because Hegelian Marxist dialectics will retain and look at this, we'll deal with the commodity form, it's been here, we'll do it, but there's always this residue, right, that goes on, right, in a sense, trying to rupture from that. Yeah. So I know it's hard to say, but I mean, again, this is a kind of an encounter with contingency and precarity that most people never get there, in a sense. It's not safe. It's not a, quote, to use this ridiculous language of political, it's not a safe space. It's really a very, you kind of think of it as a liberated zone, but you don't really know, where the continuum is, what the next step in a certain way. So there's a kind of forced innovation that's going on in some ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, yeah, but predicated on love, right? Yeah, predicated on love. Love is very important for him here. Very important. I mean, what kind of love? We'll see. Ultimately, let me just see if I can find any crucial things. So, the kairos, going back to what Josh meant, but let's look at this. The integration of metamorphosis, right? 8.4. In Biopolitical, page 256, love is general intellect. The event/decision thus invests the machine of the general intellect. It is put to work across its entire extension and in all its efficiency. It is this amorous explosion of the general intellect that turns resistance into power, and it makes of the machine of metamorphic events of the common subject. It is also the common telos that produces the subject. Yeah. So, the integration of metamorphosis and production of subjectivity becomes entirely evident when seen from the standpoint of the general intellect. From here, fixed capital is incorporated in bodies, and consequently, the multitude is presented as a toolbox and a workshop of the general intellect. The material production and production of subjectivity can no longer be separated. General intellect means at once production of a new nature and that of a new subjectivity. Yeah. So he's talking about transformation of, general conditioned human nature. This is really a kind of transformation of what nature is about. This is what's going on. After the epoch of the centaur and the man-man, that of the man-machine, which will be thus defined by the metamorphosis of the human into a common amorous machine. The singular constellations present themselves as the machine of a common subjectivity. The subjective decision is the expression of this machine, and the event is its production. Is it possible to think of a political party as the subject, that is, as the biopolitical machine of the multitude between love and poverty? At times, in the other history, the revolutionary movement of the poor has been just that. The Paris Commune was. There's a time, and there's a common kairos in which one says, all together, let us decide. So that full time, of kairos will be experienced, and then we're, quote unquote, all together. Yeah.
What's the meaning of Kairos?
Kairos is an authentic time. It's a religious term. Yeah. the fullness of time. Yeah. So, this is what, kind of a path out for him, to go the way of this, metamorphosis where the general intellect of Marx is really the creation of a new nature and a new subjectivity. That's where he's really trying to go, right? The production of a new subjectivity, production of a new agency, etc. When you think about this, you have to ask yourself, how much of our nature is conditioned by capitalism?
All of it.
Yes, right. So what are we really doing here? What are we really doing here? I mean, in a sense, if you're going to really be radical and you can't be reabsorbed back into the thing, you're basically transforming human nature, right? Many ways. That's what he's really saying. We're not at first nature, we're always at second nature in capitalism. So this is a thing that the Frankfurt School thinks through. We have not experienced anything. Heidegger's thinking this in a different way. All these thinkers are thinking, Negri is trying to think this vis-a-vis the general intellect and the production of a new subjectivity. How do we get back to real experience instead of this superficial, I'm going to negotiate something different today in my everyday life, or I'm going to do this, etc., or I've got to go to work. How much are we conditioned? So Heidegger, in a way, unconditions the thing, and you begin to see how your thingification takes place, how your reification of reification is taking place, all these kind of notions that are happening. But at the same time, how do we ultimately build a movement out of this that may produce a new subjectivity and a new human? This is the Spinozist-Marxist view. Hegel thinks we come to the end of history, right? Very big difference. So he's trying to open this up in terms of the common versus the real is the rational and the rational is the real. So the subject and the common are now being, talked about, right? In some ways. What do we have in common? What is the common space? What does the commons, ultimately do? Etc. Right? So then he goes on, to put this more into, context vis-a-vis texts, you begin to see power wants to invest, 9-4. This is important to remember. In stretching out within temporality, power wants to invest the to come as well. Biopolitical domination is thus presented as a future investment whose aim is that of establishing control over present production. It is monetary, technological, terrorist, the weapons of extermination, investments projected into the future in order to guarantee measure beyond the limit of time as well. In this way, power submits to the lure of the common telos and distorts it. Once again, we observe to what extent the to come of the common stands opposed to the future of power. So this is a battle of futural, the future antérieur being played out. It's very interesting in a way, between what power to come, right, and how it organizes, right, the exploitation of living social labor through the form of control, And this again is Deleuze, the societies of control, where we've gone. The next step is the society of surveillance. From disciplinary societies of Foucault to Deleuze's, societies of control, now we have societies of surveillance. The whole society is under surveillance, like it or not. My friend Peter Bratz says, who cares? Well, in some ways, he may be right to a degree, but to another degree, in a way,
We'll see what
you're
happens.
being mapped, yes, and your
future
concept.
Yeah, well, there's
your
no
future's
future,
being
right?
mapped. Yeah, right, exactly. I do care in some ways. Yeah, that's another thing.
Yeah, I care about my future.
Yes, indeed, and that's where that's where care is. That's where care is, and care, as we learn from Heidegger, is of the earth. So it's a planetary moment, right? Going back to that. So anyway, this is the other thing. The state. This means that in the common, the state arranges the exclusion of the poor person who is the producer of that same common. 9-5. The violence of this exclusion, inasmuch as it is realized in the common, is extreme. It develops in the temporal continuity of life and becomes a coercive force of calculation, a block on generation, and a tautological investment of linguistic production. What Marx described, and above all, still in terms of a tendency, as the real subsumption by society by capital, that is within capital, is accomplished in postmodernity. This nevertheless produces a paradox. This subsumption is so intense, and we all experience this, think about it, that we could appear to be the extinction of capital in society. But it is not so. This ambiguous configuration maintains within the postmodern society of control a level of violence that remains absolutely unchanged, that of command, in the same way as the presumption of measure remains unchanged. What is parasitical in this configuration is the state of real subsumption. And can we define power then as the parasitical organization that seeks to bestow measure on the immeasurable? Interesting working definition of power. Is it at once partial, right, and general suggestion, but nonetheless it could constitute an adequate ideal type. So the decision is the subjective event of the multitude. So the third and definitive definition of the decision, after we defined it progressively, as two things: the technology of love and as subjective transvaluation. Right? Okay, so he goes through this thing, and then he goes through forms of rebellion. Yeah, the multiple. Love deploys beyond the edge of time, and that the common gathers up as a telos of multiple singularities. And thus, love, living labor, that determines the conditions of the decision as the self-government of the multitude within the common. So in postmodernity, the eminent form of rebellion is the exodus from obedience. That is to say, from participation in measure, i.e. as the opening to the immeasurable. And this is important too, because really the exodus of it is the participation in how we're measured, in a way. This takes away from people, I mean, in some ways this begins to give people reason to not talk about peer pressure or peers or stuff like that. It's really the participation in measure that you're really engaging there in certain ways, right? And that you have to open yourself to what is immeasurable, the thing that really makes us human, in a way. That has, you want to go back to humanistic tendencies. The great humanistic tendency that's hardly ever talked about is we're so complicated, we're so immeasurable, etc. Until we accept that, we were not going to be, really fully communistic in intent and in telos, right? In many ways, to think about this, So Exodus is a creative event, right? How do you get out of the event of reappropriation, right? And then the decision of rebellion is a subjective determination. So 10.6 and 10.5 are very interesting vis-a-vis rebellion and reappropriation, right? How do you avoid reappropriation? And then he's going to go on 11.2, just to go forward, right? And again, the agency here, 10.7, the event of the general intellect is a process that goes from the multitude of singularities to the common machine. The self-government of the multitude is the common machine of the general intellect, as such, revolutionary subjectivity. So how does it become subjective, political, or thoroughly subjective and thoroughly political? So he has to go in through the analysis, and he's going to define what a political subject is. And that's a multiplicity of singularities which engages itself in the construction of the common goal or the common telos, right? And then he goes through the militancy of the common, of singularities, and the exercise of living labor that destroys every measure of dead labor. Right? So anyway, any thoughts? So doing politics means to resist and to rebel, 12.1 in the biopolitical postmodern. But at the same time, it's to express a biopolitical subject extended between poverty and love, in which decides upon the common goal or the telos or objective or end. For that reason, doing politics means to take leave of domination, to to take leave of the power of the state and every transcendental illusion in order to produce new common cooperative temporalities and spaces on the edge of being. Again, right? To realize the amorous innovation that bestows meaning. So you need love or amorous innovation that will give you meaning, right? As well as authentic time. So, that which cannot take leave is the modern political party. That configuration constructed itself on the basis of representation or the vanguard realizes that the political party is always constrained within that space of power that excludes the biopolitical determination, while on the contrary, we are speaking, and this is important, of a subject that is once the product of the biopolitical and generates in the biopolitical. It is not political representation that can construct the common telos within the multitude. On the contrary, it can only be constructed by taking leave of representation. Very important. And all the representative institutions in the new common temporalities install itself in the new time. The common occupation considers the professional politician as a contemptible, infamous figure. So how shall we take leave? He asked that question, right? Not easy, page 260. What happened? What?
No, not easy.
Not easy, no. Yeah, that's good, yeah. Proletarians of all countries unite is not enough. It's an injunction, if you go down the way, mix up the races and cultures, constitute the multicolored Orpheus, who generates the common from the human. So it's the poet liberator. Rachel, you read Eros and Civilization. Remember the Orphic myth is in there as the liberating myth, right? Against Prometheus, right? Which is interesting, right?
Yeah.
Which generates the common from the human, break down all the transcendental barriers that prevent the singular from becoming common and that block the innovation of the eternal. That is what it means to take leave while constituting. Finally, to take leave means to construct through the extreme re-territorialization that the bodies of the multitude experience in postmodernity common machines through which men and women stretch out beyond the edge of time, or rather construct machinaically or in the immeasurable, turning the technological monster into the angel of the to come. Okay, so this is Angelus Novus in some ways, except the look is no longer backward. It's only forward, the new angel, right? And you know, his friend, and they've been in many debates, Antonio Cacciari, who was the mayor of Venice, a communist, wrote a very good book on angelology. He was a medievalist. And, you can see part of that conversation, happening here. When through a biopolitics of Exodus, the singularities decide to turn the multitude into a revolutionary subject, teleological production without prefiguring the common exposes it to the to come. The vita activa of the multitude is an open and a total dystopia, and the decision to revolutionize the eternal is irreversible.
Well,
With the
explain that.
events, okay, go ahead. Yeah. You can't reverse the city of man in May of '68.
Right.
It's an irreversible decision. He and Badiou are on the same page here. That's the event, right? Loose the arrow of the revolutionary temporality of the common. All power to the imagination, right? In the face of the kairos of poverty and of love, the city of God is now only a bad stench. Alma Venus, the daily paean to the revolution, our Venus, and the revolution of the eternal, in some ways, right? So anyway, that's where he ends with this multitude and the decision. So, we've gone from, with Negri, from the political of the multitude, living labor, and then ultimately the decision, the three parts of this, right? In these ways, right? And I like this notion of transvaluation of values, where the eternal, where you're able to take the eternal now, right? The nunc stans in medieval time, the time of the now, and the stance of the now, and work it out with innovation. How do you take something from there? How do you take stuff out of medieval chivalry? How do you take stuff out of the carnivalesque? How do you take stuff out of that and then orient it today in the decision that remains fidelity to all power to the imagination and the transformation to come. Also, the real radical question of can we really get back to first nature, whatever that is? Can we really get back to the experiential subject? I mean, we are experiencing, we're constituting, but we're not really experiencing, in some ways. There's just too much coding. There's too much information overload. There's too much of this, going on all day for us to really have that kind of deep experiential thing. This is
Too
what
much
Adorno
organized
wants
activity.
in terms of busting back to the subject. This is what Althusser wants. History is a process without a subject. The process is the important part. This is what Negri's looking for with second nature, etc. Heidegger, obviously. And
Why he went to live in the Black Forest.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, stay away. Yeah.
Negri
Come
did
see
too.
me.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
It's interesting that
Yeah.
the phrase second nature has become a sort of a positive term, it's like the song, it's second nature to me now,
yeah, yeah.
so how did second nature become,
Well, again,
From alienation
it's
to,
secondary experience,
yeah.
right? It's
What-
secondary
yeah.
experience. Without the primary experience of playing it the first time and really feeling it deeply, that you can reinvent it and rework it and stuff like that, it's yeah.
it's interesting, it's gone from a sense of term of alienation to a term of approbation in a sense.
Yeah.
Being second nature means a good habit in a sense.
Yeah, but I mean, wouldn't that be part of a behaviorism that's kind of operative out
Sure.
there? Yeah, it's a behaviorism,
Yeah.
yeah.
Second nature, if you repeat it enough, it
Yeah,
becomes internalized.
absolutely, absolutely, yeah. It creates almost Pavlovian conditioned reflexes in some ways,
Mm.
yeah.
Well, I like that imaginative note that you ended on, or
Which was?
summarizing it. Well, you
Oh,
just said
okay.
it beautifully.
Oh, okay. Well,
Just
thank
finished
you.
it.
Yeah.
But back to,
I find this a bit, to be very honest about this, I find this to be somewhat confused and not so logically following. I mean, I have to read it multiple times, as Beth said when she came in, 6 times. I think it's really an experiment for him going on. Again, I think it's important because we're seeing where this whole thing emerges for him in heart, right? And that, it's an interesting thing to talk about love and the eternal and innovation.
That was the
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
I wanted
please,
to
yeah.
just go back to,
Yeah.
and I like the imaginative
Yeah,
part.
yeah.
I think that's important,
Yeah.
very important. But back to 12.1, which you just read.
Yeah,
Therefore, in the biopolitical postmodern, doing politics means, first of all, to resist and rebel, but it is at the same time to express a biopolitical subject extended between poverty and love, which decides on the common telos. Can you say more about that?
well, I mean, the common telos is really to be a life without domination, which is kind of hard to dream of in this point, we've seen this constantly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And look, the revolutionary transformative project, the first thing you'd have to do vis-a-vis planetary technology and the planet itself is destroy fossil fuel industry, the entire petrochemical industry. And the interesting thing is, in all these politicians, nobody really talks about, we've got to destroy this, but we have a plan for a different kind of, alternative energies, and these are where the jobs will go, because most of the people want to get out of the petrochemical industry to begin with. The reason they don't want to leave is because they're secure in those jobs, they have work, etc. It's the same thing in the, oil and gas industry, and I've talked to some of these people. I worked on an oil rig when I was a teenager for
Do
a
you think
summer,
that
so,
relates to poverty and love, that
The which?
relationship? Do you think that relates, poverty and love?
Yes, well, poverty and love, I mean, this is the new subject. He's well aware of what's going on in terms of the poverty of the multitude, And I mean, I would take a term like that and extend it to say, we're really dealing with psychic poverty. We're talking about the poverty of the imagination. We're talking about many levels of poverty here. Not only the poverty of philosophy, of which Marx entitled his attack, which he's also attacking here. I mean, there's a lot of reproduction going on here, textual reproduction of the attack against Pierre Joseph Proudhon, And, anyway, so, you would really have to think this term in many, many dimensions here. In his case, he's really talking about, a kind of Franciscan moment, right? In terms of where poverty is addressed. But it's addressed through this kind of new love, right? That, is coming together, right? Coming together as a thing, So the poor people's movement to Negri would be a positive thing if you're without the transcendental illusion that somehow this becomes part of modern political parties, right? That's what he's really talking about,
I was
right?
just gonna ask
In a
about
way,
that. So
there's no
he-
such
he
thing
doesn't have
as
hope for
absorbing
parties.
this into the modern political party. He's not foolish, no. He's been through too much, Yeah.
Does he get rid of
Just look at
democracy
the
altogether
PG.
in a way? Right?
Yeah, in a certain way, yeah. You're just going through, in some ways, these steps that you go through from the monarchy, the democracy, the republic, all these things, all these forms, and then the democracy on the way to communism,
Yeah.
trying to bypass any kind of liberal democracy. Right?
Even
The
direct
bypass.
democracy.
But, and
Yeah.
even direct, yes,
Yeah.
exactly, whatever that means ultimately.
Well,
Yeah, no, I know, yeah.
The,
Representative democracy, throw that
I
out
get that,
completely.
yeah.
I participated, Phil and I
Yeah.
today, swear by our sins, we went to a representative democracy moment, right? So, we asked for your blessings going forward, before the tribunal. But anyway,
Going to the
yeah,
candidate-
then the direct democracy, yeah, of
candidates
course.
debate.
There's direct democracy, he's trying to bypass this. The term for direct democracy here is the common.
Yeah.
The goal and the objective of the common, right? And how do you produce revolutionary subjectivity is a code word for how do you get back to the experience of first nature when you say this is all totally insane. We're sitting here under fluorescent lights, ruining our eyesight, right, etc., going out to breathe air that is, basically so polluted, etc., to think about the levels of the insanity that we are facing at this point, and to take that away, in a sense, is part of the project of revolutionary subjectivity, and the task is you don't go mad doing it, because we're walking a thin line, because you have to function, right, in everyday life, yeah. Steal this bread, that might be the new shop we do, the bakery, steal this bread, or, we should think of things like this. How do you build a common in a different way? I mean, this is really the alternative. Look, the problem to me on the left, has always been, I thought about this a lot and talked to a lot of people, and, John Clark was an anarchist philosopher and a good friend of mine, talked about this. The left never really got itself together and got a bank. What do you need in this society to function? And so you need money. Yeah. Well, how many people today, if we had a bank, instead of just amalgamated, could go and say, I need, a loan to do this and that and that. And, you actually provide a real service and you build a kind of alternative. Instead of the left, that's bourgeois, no, it isn't, It's part of what's going on in terms of building a common. Nobody's saying, what, who?
John Clark?
What about John Clark?
Where was he from?
He's from New Orleans.
Yeah. We met, right.
Yeah. He's an anarchist philosopher who has an experimental commune called La Terre Institute in Mississippi. It's got 100 acres, and
you
people
introduced
work
him.
on it. He'll give you if you feel like you want to be a real pioneer and give up on rent, he'll give you an acre as long as you work it and
No, I
build
thought it was a
on
real
it
deal.
and all this. It's a good deal. It's got a land trust. A land trust. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. Mississippi, give me a break. Yeah.
You've seen Mississippi.
I've seen Mississippi many times. The Delta's beautiful, and I've been to Faulkner's house and to the place where he wrote a lot of the stuff. Yeah, there's some interesting. And, 3 of the best writers the United States ever had came out of Mississippi, right? But it's also Mississippi, goddamn, in terms of what it did in, many years. Yeah. And there are many Mississippis. There's the Gulf Coast, they call the Gold Coast now, which is the casinos, Biloxi, Gulfport. There's the Pascagoula shipyards, which was an industrial center, You had Mobile Bay, which was a big port of entry with a lot of industry. So this is another thing that, people forget down there, right? And, yeah.
Muscle Shoals.
And then in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, yeah, of course. And then there was in Mississippi, I mean, you had real movements, you know, Ralph Engelman, who Sean knows, his best friend was Goodman, who was killed in Mississippi as part of the civil rights movement. He still goes to see Goodman, she's still alive, his mother.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 90-something
I
years
knew
old.
her,
Yeah, you know, yeah. So anyway, I mean, you have this thing, and you heard I don't know if you were at the Left Forum when Belafonte spoke, but he talked about the time when he called up Sidney Poitier. They were they all used to hang out together, you know, and they would travel together. And Sidney, pack your bags. Where we going, Harry?
No.
Mississippi. And there's a long pause on the other line. And finally, Portier, Mississippi, you crazy, Harry? You know, yeah, no, we're going to go. You know, and this was, you know, during that great, you know, moment down there. Yeah, in some ways, yeah. But anyway, yeah, so I mean, again, going back to this thing about unless you establish, and this is a problem, I mean, I know right now it's very imaginative, and I'm doing imaginative variations, but it seems to me it's really, you know, if you're going to really consider an alternative, consider the alternative. Don't say we're going with, you know, this electoral processes, this is progress, and all this kind of stuff. It's not progress. You know, like I said, we're in 1930, 1931. You know, with the most progressive candidates on the scene. That's not progress. That's a return of the repressed.
We've had regression
What?
since then. In many ways, it's been regressed since.
Yeah, a series of regressions. Yeah, absolutely. But why not the hard work of saying, okay, yeah, let's think about, you know, things like finance. Let's think about a common space. This is what we're trying to do with this new group, to find a space. We went out to look at a building in Williamsburg. It's just not conducive to us, you know. I mean, you know, this was not the greatest place. I mean, it's really willing to, you know, cut a pretty good deal, but it's not good. So now we have City as School maybe as a site, you know. But what we need is places where, you know, we have excellent cooks. There's going to be a competition between Rachel and Peter on cheesecakes yeah, coming up. I mean, you know, but in a way, yeah, I mean, you know, you need places gathering, you know. And this is elementary. You know, in Russia they had this. You know, Bakhtin writes about the meeting hall, the meeting place. You know, yeah, nothing.
No, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah,
to
it's
get
hard.
people to meet.
Yeah, the atomistic everyday life, right? This kind of, you know, this individuation that Stiegler speaks about, right? Very, very hard to get people together. You know, today, if this had been, I mean, at least circa New Orleans, 1969, after a rally like this today, and you have that amount of people there, at least 100 people in each group would say, hey, let's go, you know, do something today. Let's go eat together. Let's do this. And you start movements that way. You don't start movements just because of the spectacle and the events and going on social media. You need contact, you know. Yeah, you need, you know, yeah, this is really true. This was one of the successful parts of the 60s to a degree. There were many problems, but at least you would continually go, you know, through the night sometimes, you know, arguing, doing things like that. And it built a sense of solidarity and community to a degree. There were many infights. We all know the scars that came out of that, and et cetera. But at the same time, you know, you need that kind of contact, you know. And I'm not so sure technological social media is going to do this. It's not going to do it. And anyway, it has the capacity to distort instead of being in this room where I can be confronted or I can confront someone about, no, that's wrong, and let me show you why it's wrong. I'll demonstrate it. You know, that doesn't happen on the internet. Yeah, doesn't happen. Right? So, in many ways, so, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I find this it's stimulating, you know, in many ways. I like the fact, for me, one of the reasons I like Negri is he's trying to do something different against the old positions of representation, against that of reading history in terms of the history of modern sovereignty or reading history of the modern political philosophy. It's a very different way of doing politics, right? And it's in a kind of call again, your right to resist. Again, this is your basic human right, is that of resistance. And from there, how do you get to, you know, the innovation? How do you live on the edge of time? You know, we say we're on the edge, but, you know, yeah, that's the precarity. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, in some ways. Yeah, I mean, again, I think the biggest enemy, I mean, I'm not saying that people shouldn't have much better wages, and it's good to know that there's money in the bank, but the biggest enemy in some ways is the security principle. This has killed the unions only about wages and benefits. It has killed, any kind of movements going forward. I need security. It's killed academia, job security. Tenure is one of the most overblown concepts out there, right, in some ways. Tenure was built to justify academic freedom, to be outspoken, to talk truth to power, to be able to really think, in a sense. All it's about now is security. That's all it's about, job security. Most of the people, Stanley and I did a study of this, of 6,000 tenured professors at CUNY, less than 1,000 still publish after they get tenure, still make a contribution. So you're talking about 15% after the job security. Tell your wife and hunt her.
Right.
She's got to be, yeah. Right.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah.
I talked there on, yeah.
No, I know.
She was there?
She was gonna go.
Oh, okay,
I wanna-
okay, yeah, it
how
was
did
fun.
go?
It was fun, yeah,
Good.
yeah, it was good, yeah,
Good.
yeah. Even the Trotskyites were, silenced, yeah, it was good. No, it's all right.
Trotskyites or something?
I talked about union disasters, yeah.
It's hard to silence the Trotskyites.
Yeah, really, how'd you?
Yeah, no, I did good. And they were very pleased with what I said, too. No, I mean, I knew the audience, I saw the view, yeah, it was good. Oh, it was great, Michael, they told Glick after that, it was funny, yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to meet her. There were a lot of
Yeah,
people
yeah.
from the English department, but it was good, we had a good time.
Good.
Yeah, about an hour,
Good.
The food was really good.
Oh, good.
So surprisingly good. Yeah, tell her she should go to union meetings because the food's very good. You get a good lunch. Yeah, that's all. Yeah, so anyway, I mean, there's so much, again, I mean, the thing that is interesting here is that, the Marxist philosophy of the future, to kind of wrap it up, I mean, in a way, needs to really think through, these conditioned terms that we're so accustomed to using. Now, I like this about Negri. I like this about Althusser, to a degree, of the people we read. I like the fact that, for me, what you can draw from this, Lefebvre has a very interesting program for pedagogy. I think of all the people we read, Lefebvre's view of history, how one would build a curriculum for an alternative, is the most interesting. He actually went into that fray, into the educational. Negri's more interested in the practical politics. I think he's very valuable for that. Lukács is a landmark. I mean, to go back where we started at the beginning with Gramsci and Lukács, both are landmarks in terms of thinking. However, could be very outmoded today. In a way. I'm not one to say just because it was written in 1922, because you go back to the eternal, I mean, in a way. You go back to the time is not, just because it's, what is it, March 2nd, 2019, and everything else is out of date, right? That's not the issue. The issue is, does it really speak to the contemporary situation? And there are things in Lukács, the understanding of reification, right? But, maybe we're going through the reification of reification now, and that may be a new term to think about, right? Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just saying. Yeah, so anyway, and, I mean, I thought Lefebvre, Korsch is a very good summarizer. I know we didn't spend much time on Korsch. The Italian school, they had their moment post-World War II. For me, they're very interesting alongside the development of the neo-realist cinema, and also, in some ways, spawned this anti-Hegelianism that Negri is a part of. Gramsci is very Hegelian. Gramsci comes out of the Hegelian tendency. And maybe the next time we'll do Freud and philosophy. The next time we do philosophy, we should really do this whole Hegelian moment, what's split from Hegel. Not only left and right wing, but where the split was in the movement, the Spinozist, Marxists, the, mechanical materialists, the Plekhanoffians, all these kind of things, how that happened. Yeah, what were we going to say? I'm
No,
sorry.
I'm saying also Deleuze is not very Hegelian, I don't think.
No, not at all.
No.
He hates Hegel.
Yeah, I mean, but
Hates.
Well,
Yeah.
good for him.
You know what he did with Marx? Hegel with a beard. This is in the beginning of Difference and Repetition.
Huh.
He starts working with images. Marx is Hegel with a beard. He doesn't hate Marx. I mean, there's a lot of writings, the lectures he gave on Marx called The Grandeur of Marx. Yeah, but they're not writings. They're just lectures he gave. Yeah. So, Deleuze and, this whole post-structuralist thing is very interesting because what it really tried to do is exceed, what the past, thinking could not do. It was not hagiography towards the Lukács, the Korches, the Gramsci's, etc. It was a confrontation, and it was a break. And this should be taken into account. And it wasn't just, as a lot of Marxists in the States said, reactionary. I think this is a very limited way of looking at it, that postmodernism or post-structuralism was reactionary. It's not the case at all. They're coming up with a kind of new terminology, new ways of looking at things, that is much more influenced by people that were not read actively before that, such as Heidegger, such as, Wittgenstein, all trying to bring this in, in a way. Yeah. Lyotard's most impressive book to me, I mean, there are many impressive ones, and he's a great writer, is a book called The Différent, which is a Wittgensteinian analysis, modern, of where a difference is in dispute. It's a book on legal philosophy and linguistic philosophy in one.
And who's the author?
The Différent, Jean-François Lyotard. Yeah, it's in English called The Différent. Yeah, instead of différence, right? The Différent. Yeah, the difference, right? Yeah, and how one structures legal disputes around this kind of terminology. Yeah, and he wrote that in the 70s, the late 70s, early 80s. Very good book. Yeah, wrote a book on gaming. So they branched out in a certain way too. Yeah. And Agamben really says historical materialism, and I think he's saying the same thing. The standard historical material is not enough for us to think through this era. Yeah, Stiegler is saying that in a different way. Yeah. So you have, in terms of the people today, obviously Stiegler. Badiou is the one that's remained most faithful, I think, to the, what he calls the communist, hypotheses, right? And there's a notion of fidelity to the thought of the event, that one must remain fidelity to that moment. Stiegler, in terms of understanding, I think, technology and its effect on us and what it's done, in many ways, in a very sophisticated way, is very good on this. And then the post-structuralists, I don't see the problem in rereading, the books on gaming and the books on legal philosophy like Lyotard. Certainly Deleuze's book on the logic of sense, meaning, sense, and etc., which is a very good investigation into Stoic logic. I mean, Deleuze is not, quote unquote, the traditional Marxist. But again, these are people that accept Marx and say, yes, of course, this is the best critique we have of capital, but it might not be enough. Yeah? So they're not anti-Marxist, ever, And they're not really post-Marxist in a sense, in some ways. Post meaning, that they're thinking they're, totally beyond. In a way. The post. I'm talking about the French structuralists, Lyotard and Deleuze and, these people, in many ways. And the return to previous thinkers, like Althusser with Machiavelli. His pieces on Rousseau were pretty amazing, etc. Negri going back to Leopardi, the books on Spinoza. Yeah, please, yeah.
Yeah, there's a book, or one or two books now on Diderot that have been reviewed recently, and apparently he was, of all the French philosophers, he was Marx's favorite. And,
yeah, of course.
And
the story of his library? It's a beautiful story.
Yeah, he left it in Paris, but Catherine the Great paid money to
he was broke.
Preserve it.
He was broke,
Yeah.
and he had to sell his library, and she heard about this, and
Yeah.
she says, okay, I'm going to buy it from you, but you can use it until you die. Then it's bequeathed to me.
That's in the whole.
So she basically, gave him back his library while he was alive, and then took it upon his.
Yeah, it was very nice.
She was a shrewd one. Yeah.
He eventually gave up on his hopes to
Convert her.
Be an advisor to reform the Russian Empire. And,
The Russian Empire,
And,
yeah.
you know, liberalize it. And,
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah,
She
we-
did him a favor, though.
Yeah, but yeah, it's not so bad. I mean, she was practical, and she didn't think his ideas were very practical, which they may not have been at the time, so.
Well, it's a great moment in French philosophy, the Lumière. Yeah, I mean, Rousseau, Diderot, D'Alembert.
Diderot was very.
You have the mechanical materialist. Diderot is a completely undervalued